Well, we have determined there's a quorum here this evening. We have 4 members. Tonight's meeting is being convened in compliance with Governor Cuomo's executive orders, which suspend certain provisions of the open meetings law to allow municipal boards to convene meetings via video conferencing without in-person attendance by the public. The public has been provided with the ability to view, hear, and participate in the meeting, and a transcript of the meeting will be provided at a later date. The link to the live stream of the meeting has been provided to the public, and a video of the meeting will be made available on public access television, as well as a link on the town's website. Further, all submission materials and agenda materials are available to be viewed on the town's website. So without further ado, I'll call the meeting to order. And our first matter is a public hearing. This is for Dr. Singh, 15 Heathcote Drive. Application for a subdivision approval, lot line amendments, merger, wetland permit, tree removal permit, and stormwater permit, 15 Heathcote Drive, Chappaqua. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, we're off to a rousing start.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, for the record, can we, instead of saying aye and here, maybe summarize who has said what for the record?
On the last vote, you're saying?
Yes, so, moved by and seconded by.
Okay, I think the motion was made by Dick. I
True.
think it was seconded by Tom.
True.
Thank you.
And I think we had 4 ayes, unanimous vote on that.
Correct.
Actually, have more
Thank
ayes
you.
than that, but they don't count, the other ones.
Right, okay, great. Okay, so we're here. Jerry, do you want to, or who on the team wants to lead off and bring us up to speed? Brad, do you want to do that, or?
Terrific, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to do that. And good evening, everyone. Good to see you. For the record, Brad Schwartz from Zarin and Steinmetz, representing Dr. Singh, and I'm joined tonight by Dr. Singh and his full team. Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to Jerry in a minute or two to present the plans in detail. I just wanted to spend a minute reminding everybody where we left off at the July meeting. The planning board had asked us to look at moving the house forward towards Heathcote, and we've done that. The house is now 30 feet closer towards the road as the board had requested. It's essentially in the same location as where the board had approved the location during the TAVO application about 2 years ago. So we're following the prior precedent that was established by the planning board during the TAVO application. And Mr. Curley had also asked at the end of the meeting that we also respect the same clearing and grading limit line restriction that was previously adopted for the Bukowski application a couple of months ago. And we've done that too. So there's no clearing or grading within the 50-foot rear yard setback. We've come tonight with this plan, really trying to put our best foot forward. All transparency with the board, we had initially considered moving the house forward just 15 feet, and we thought that might accomplish the same objectives. We met out in the field with one of the neighbors, did some more internal review and listened to the feedback, and considering the TAVO application, we just decided to come back with a 30-foot difference tonight. We didn't want to come back and talk about 15 feet tonight. So again, we're putting our best foot forward, and we hope that the board and the neighbors are all pleased with the updated design. So Jerry, if you want to take the board through the plans in greater detail, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think, Brad, that was a good summary. Our take last time, with the board, I think that last time with the board, we had made some progress, and in the end, it came back to, this 30-foot thing. So what we did was the last time the board saw the project, the location of the home was in this area, and we've moved it up to the 30 feet. And I tried to make that clearer on the zoning plan. So the zoning plan, we've keyed the home locations. So where we are now, of course, is this highlighted plan The Tavo plan is in this B, this D and B. So you can see they're kind of overlapped on each other. Last time we were with the board, we were presenting Plan C. We were back here, C and C. And of course, the original homestead was about this area. So that's what we kind of brought that forward and working with Dr. Singh. And he said, you know, if you make it work, I'd like you to make it work. I'd like to be a good neighbor. I'd like to make sure everyone is comfortable. And just said, you know, just try to make the plan work. So we worked it through several times. We had to explain to Bob and Sabrina, it's the domino effect. Once you move the house 30 feet forward, everything else has to move too. So we had to basically take apart the site plan and put it back together again. So what we have done is we've kept our same curb cut location, and we swung that driveway. We had to tighten up this radius. It required, we put in about 125 feet of low wall. It'll be maybe 2 feet and maybe get the 4 feet in the middle and 2 feet again. We still worked in the drop-off area. It was very important for the Singh family to have this feature. And it's all permeable pavers, as well as it's all permeable planting in this area. It did require, because we shifted it down, it did require the removal of a couple more trees in here. It was interesting. We got a little closer to the Rodriguez house corner than the Tavo plan, but I think that's really because if you look at this jog in the Tavo corner, it jogged back. But if you extended that over, it would pretty much be the same thing. As Brad said, we did tighten up the grading. We made sure we weren't grading anymore in the in the 50-foot rear yard building setback line. We still are able to, get some planting in this area here. We really kind of drew the line at this point here because Alan can talk to this more, but this is the area where the stormwater infiltration has to be based on, what the soil can accommodate, and of course, downslope, gravity, and that type of thing. So we had to preserve that, and we stayed with that. We were able to do that, and, hence that wall helped us because we were able to stop grading a little bit more. Our wall in this area got a little bit taller, not much, but I talked to Bob Scioli about this, and, once we can, reach a conclusion with the board of the site plan layout, we're happy to have the structural engineer design all the walls to meet town code. When we were out at the site with the neighbor, we were able to take some views to see, what this might look like from the neighbor's perspective to try to be a little more sensitive. So we did provide some photographs on here of what the views might be. So view number 4 is looking onto the property, and views 3 and 7 and 6. These are the views. This is the view number 6. This is the view to the Singh property from the adjacent property. This is standing with our back to the garage, looking at the Singh property. There's already a little bit of screening going on there, which is good. It gives it a nice buffer. There's some nice tall trees, as you can see, that help frame it. We're keeping a big 48-inch maple back here, or oak, sorry. So I think that's, we got a nice high canopy of trees to kind of frame the view of the house, so it doesn't really stick out, but it's going to be framed. And then, of course, we're filling in with fencing in here, and we're filling in with all the plantings that we're filling in. The previously proposed planting plan that we had worked on and discussed with the board, where we've done quite a bit of planting here to create kind of a naturalistic hedgerow of various size spruce trees. And I think we go up to 12 to 14 feet in some areas, 10 to 12s, 8 to 10s. And then we mix that in with some smaller trees, some dogwoods and tupelos, and then, of course, some larger shrubs, the lilacs and the viburnums, all being that it's going to grow into a nice, dense, natural hedgerow, and then it ties into this big grove of natural trees. There's that 48-inch oak that I was referring to. So this thing is monstrous and provides a nice canopy and a nice backdrop to make the house have a nice established look to it.
Jerry, why don't you also point out the screening fence location? I'm not sure if it's on this plan or the first plan you had up on the screen.
Yeah, let me just try to blow this up a little bit. So
Also, Jerry, wasn't there an architectural change where you
yes.
moved the patio that was on the eastern side of the building and flipped it around to give a little bit more privacy to the neighbor?
Sure, I'll get to that in a second. So we still felt that, because we were shifting things around, we said, well, where is this fence really needed? And we felt it was really needed right here. So we still have 125 feet of solid green, 6-foot height green fence, stained solid green. And we do this quite a bit. We use that solid fence and we stain it green, dark green, forest green. And once you put the plantings in with it, it really blends nicely and creates a nice screen. So we still have 125 feet of fence here. This is just a view to natural area here. And this is pretty heavily planted here and here, and there's really nothing in here. And we didn't want the fence, so we looked at it, and the fence, stepping down the hill, it doesn't really look very attractive when these things, they don't rack very well on the hills. But another
Is that
thing-
a wood fence or a plastic fence?
No,
What's it- what-
it's a cedar fence. It's a solid cedar fence, stained
Thank you.
forest green.
Okay,
So the other thing, we noticed, and we were trying to be sensitive to the neighbor. And what we noticed in the original, in the original plan, the proposed second floor plan, there was an outdoor balcony area. And this was the original plan here. So what it was, it kind of opened up. There was a bedroom here and it opened up and you had this balcony. And when you looked out on the section, this would be, it's right here. So this was the balcony and it happened to be looking, due north. And because we went 30 feet back toward the street, now we're looking right toward, the Rodriguez backyard. So we said, well, why don't we worked with Dr. Singh's designer and said, wouldn't it be possible if we could turn this and make this look out over Dr. Singh's backyard instead of the neighbor's backyard? And he went back to the floor, he went back to the drawing table and he came back with, so this is how it is now, that now, you come out of the bedroom and you sit on the patio and you look out. And you look out to the backyard. This is how it was before. It looked that way to the north. Now we look only to the west. So I think that works better for everybody. Let's see. Comparisons. We can talk a little bit about the comparisons. What do we got here?
Jerry, you might also want to mention the location of the primary and expansion septic
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah. So this was the plan that we worked with the planning board prior on this, and this was something that was brought up. What would happen? When Campbell Engineering first did this, they had the primary here and the expansion area, closer to the house. And I think Michael explained it because that's where the locations of the holes were. But we can go back and do more holes, and we could switch things. So we went back and said, well, what if we switched it, and what would that do? And if we did that, we would be able to only build the primary area here. And then we would be able to save all these trees in the back. We would tighten up the grading limit line. So this would be the expansion area that wouldn't necessarily need to have built. We think it's a good candidate with the health department to allow that because, typically they like to see you have access and, we have access coming right over the backyard and right to it. So I think it's a good candidate for that. And Dr. Singh is perfectly willing to do that. Okay, so this is our site plan comparison sheet that we updated to show the new layout. And we had been doing this quite, right along with the planning board to say, this is what was approved at the time that TAVO came in. This is what is proposed now. And, how does that, change? And, one of the things that you can see right off the bat is you can see that we have a much tighter grading limit line. Theirs was much more extensive because they had the tennis court and the pool. So, that was a change right there. That was a kind of a significant change that we really, we actually have less site disturbance than the last plan. FAR, the TAVO plan was at almost 10.4. We're code compliant at 7192. Theirs was not. Clearing and grading area back then was 86.8, and we're at 71.2. So quite a reduction in disturbance area. Our building coverage went up. We did go up with the building coverage. We have a wider footprint. Our development coverage, however, went down 20,400 to 17,000. Our driveway length went down. Our house footprint went up. Of course, there's no tennis court and pool. Wetland buffer disturbance, ours went up slightly, and that's because That's because Allen has to overflow it's a wetland buffer disturbance. There is no wetland disturbance on either of the plans. But what this area represents here, this is where, and Alan can talk to this better, but these infiltration chambers have an overflow, and he's got to get the overflow down to the grade that it's going to flow by gravity and release itself should they ever need to overflow. And that's what this is. So but we consider that a temporary wetland buffer impact, because once that's installed, we're going to go back and we're going to plant that. But our tree removals did go up over the Tavo plan, and since the last time this board saw the plan, it's a couple more trees for the driveway, and our steep slopes disturbance actually was reduced, and that's because our driveway approach didn't take up as much of the steep slopes. So
Jerry, where are the additional trees being cleared from? Why is that? It seems like most of the impacts are less, so I'm just interested in knowing where that is coming from.
So what happened was when we moved the house forward, again, now we're talking about that domino effect again. I moved the house forward, so I had to move the driveway forward. So previously, the driveway came in like this, and it tracked here. And it tracked here and then swang in and came in. But now the house went 30 feet forward, so kind of the driveway went 30 foot forward. And then I clipped this 6-inch hickory here, and I think this is a holly over here. So I hit these two trees because I moved the driveway forward. I don't think either one of them are, they're not like great specimen trees, but it was unavoidable.
I see. Okay, thank you.
But we have a lower tree count for the, at least for the short term, maybe 20 years or so, because we're going to build the primary septic system closer to the house as opposed to farther away, correct?
So, Jerry, I'm confused about what the application is, because you did show the alternative as I thought you were saying that you could do that if you got the approvals. And I think that that's the one we're saying that we prefer, especially because of the point that Dick just made about, I think you saved 10 trees or something. If you take the one in front as the primary and then hold off on the one in back, maybe you save less than that. But I'm confused about what application you're asking us to approve. Which plan is it?
Well, I talked with the septic engineer, Michael Campbell. And Michael Campbell cannot go back to the health department to finalize the septic plan until we have the merger of the lots. And so he's waiting to do that. And then Michael Campbell needs to get an approval from the health department to allow this. And typically that's after, the planning board would grant an approval, then he'll go back and he'll make that request. And if granted, which we think it will be, then we will build the plan. We will build the preferred plan. I think it's to everyone's benefit to do it. So I think we have to go forward in the permit process with this board with the whole plan. And if we get that waiver from the health department, then we can move forward to the preferred plan.
But where's our protection in that? Can we memorialize that in the application and say that either
Sure.
how do we protect ourselves to be sure
You
that
would-
something happens?
Mr. Curley, that could be a condition of approval, is seeking health department approval for the plan that your board approves. If the health department turns it down for any reason, we need to come back to your board for amended approval.
So the plan that you are
Correct.
seeking, that you're asking us to approve, then, in order for you to go and move forward, would be essentially the one on the right in this.
That is correct.
Okay, so that's the preferred plan.
Can I say one thing with the fill waiver permits? Unfortunately, the fill waiver permits aren't granted by the county until such time a building permit's issued. So, I don't know, as hopeful as we are with this, and it looks good, there's no guarantee the county will sign off on it. But as Brad articulated, they would just have to come back to the planning board if they can't get the fill waiver. But unfortunately, that would be after the building permit.
Well, it seems to me that they'd have to come back for an amended tree clearing permit as part of our approval. So I think that's what Brad might have been alluding to, that they may have to come back if for some reason, this waiver is not granted by the county.
That's correct. And look, and thanks to Bob, I'll be honest, I didn't know that that permit doesn't get issued until after the building permit. But if we're holding a building permit, but we can't implement the plan that was approved, that building permit is not really meaningful anyway. So if we ultimately don't get from health department, we would have to come back to the board. So it's the same concept, maybe just memorialized a little bit different.
Okay.
Thank you.
It does
Thank you,
seem,
Bob.
it does seem unfortunate that you may end up there and have to take the extra step to come back to us. But I mean, it seems to me that we've explored the alternate plan. And so if you have to come back to us, we will already know, right, what the application is for, and it should be relatively quick and painless.
That's right. And we are always happy to hear from these folks. They're very nice. So.
Okay. Sabrina, did you have some comments on this application?
Well, one of my comments was kind of settling out the alternative septic placement versus the other plan. So I think you've addressed that. This project has met all of the zoning requirements, so it is in compliance with zoning. I really don't have any other objections, and I would say that unless there is substantial public comment that brings up anything that you have not already addressed, that I am okay with closing the public hearing and directing that a resolution, staff to direct a resolution of approval.
Okay, thank you. Sabrina, just a quick question for you. So we don't need a FAR variance at this point, and that's just because the building has changed, or is it because we're anticipating that there's a lot line merger and that it will meet the requirements of the merged lots?
No, they have redesigned the building to reduce the requirement of the FAR. And if you recall, they did receive a variance, but that's no longer necessary.
Right, right. Okay. Bob, I think you had some comments on this application?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Basically, a majority of my comments haven't been addressed. They're not substantial comments, and I understand why they haven't been, but I guess as Jerry articulated and Brad said previously, they're looking for direction on the final layout of the site plan, and then when such time that's granted from the planning board, they will address my comments. But again, they're not substantial, and I agree with Sabrina's assessment where there's no problem moving forward with the public hearing on this.
Very good. So any of these comments that you have, you'd also be comfortable if we have to condition these in the resolution?
That is correct.
Okay. I had one question for the applicant, and that was a little bit on construction sequence. At what point will you be putting the fence up? It seems to me that's kind of an important element, and perhaps it should go up first as you start to do work on the house, the site, and behind the scene. I saw that you had some stockpile areas, you know, for the septic and excavations. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that.
Say, Bob?
Yes.
Excuse me. Jerry, before you address that, could you please put up the preferred plan, the plan that is going to be the application plan that we're being asked to approve?
Gotta give it a second. There it is. It's the one on the right. It would be that plan on the right that, yeah, can you blow it up a little bit?
Could you blow that up? Just so that we don't confuse the public and confuse ourselves here. There,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. So
You want Jared to answer the question
Jerry
about the construction
yeah,
sequence?
Jerry or Ellen
Yeah,
to
well,
to respond to that issue about the
Sure,
putting up the fence and the
yeah.
sequencing.
You know, and that is one of Bob's comments in Bob's comment letter, which we are going to get to. And he did allude to that. Bob had some specific thoughts on how we should proceed with that. And I think putting that fence up first, I think that's a great idea. And then we could work our way out from that. I don't see a problem with that at all. And we could certainly work that into the plan.
Yeah, that can be incorporated into the sequencing plan,
Correct.
which makes sense.
I think so on this site. Okay. Anyone else, any questions at all before we take comments from the public?
Yes, two questions, one for the applicant, one internal question. On that fence, I've always been supportive of the fencing and the shielding here between the two properties. And I really like what you're doing, and I applaud the changes you've made to the plan in deference to the board and the neighbor's request. So thank you for that. I think it was Jerry who said that the fence stops, and that has something to do with the grade. And I completely understand that. They may not stop looking good, but the fence is important. Is the fence stopping right where the grade starts to change? Is that so?
No, we actually stopped it right here. You could see this is that row of evergreen trees that happen to be on the neighboring property. And then there's a couple of deciduous trees, and then there's this gap that opens up in here. And then we came back here, and then we kind of stopped it here. This is 125 feet. I know it doesn't look like on the plan, but it is. But we kind of stopped it here because this view in here is probably going to be kind of a naturalistic view here. And we stopped it here, and I'll go back to the site info plan. That might be helpful for a visual. And that photograph that that was on the plan. So that's, let me just blow this up a little bit. So the fence would start right behind that first tree. And so the new home is right here. So that was the idea. And this was, this group of trees right here, right where this hedge ends, that's where these groups of trees are. And this is where that opening is. And, just to give you guys a sense of scale, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, this is a 6-foot person standing here. So these are big trees. So when I talk about, the existing trees, providing that sense of framing the home and that established look, that's what I'm talking about. We've got some nice trees, but this is where this is the hedge, and we thought that, this was pretty much screened. The driveway is going to peel in this way and go out that way. So that's why we started the fence here, because you do have this nice evergreen dense screen there.
Plus, if you put a fence up there, you might actually block the sunlight on those trees, and you might actually start to lose some health on that one side.
That's a good point too. The sun is tracking from the south.
Right.
And thank you for that. The second question I have is possibly an internal question. So we're talking about approving the preferred septic fields plan, and then if the applicant can't get the approvals they want from the county, they'd have to come back to us to get approval on sort of the other septic fields plan. Is there a way we can, I think we're all on the same page that were that to happen, we would approve it at that point. So is there a way that we can just approve that now, sort of like a ranked choice voting sort of thing, that we approve both plans, but really have a preference for this other one, and would implore the applicant to seek that approval?
Well, that's interesting. Sabrina, maybe you can help on this. First of all, if we have this approved and they come back and they have to, let's say, just clear additional trees, could that just go to Dennis and not to the planning board as just a new?
Well, I think that you would approve the max, we could write the resolution where you would provide approval for the maximum removal of trees, because your mitigation plan should reflect the maximum removal. And if in fact the county does approve of the alternate plan and not clearing of the secondary system, then the permits would still be valid. It would be less trees. If you approve the plan that says that there will be less tree removal, then they have to come back for a new permit. In the past, we have approved the entire clearing, but the resolution notes that you want them to not clear the secondary system, and and leaves it in the hands of the applicant in working with the health department and informing the town of that approval.
I recall, Sabrina, that's how it was done on Button Hook Road.
Right.
Correct.
But then again, in this particular case, there might be some sort of sensitivity, because if you have something coming back, if they're coming back for the septic, we're also going to have to be dealing with clearing and grading limit lines, unless you're going to grant those to the maximum at this point. And there might also be some additional grading. It seems to me with some of the sensitivity that we've discussed with this lot merger and neighbors to the rear as well as to the sides, it might be something that still would be worth having a shot for members of the public to discuss. I'm not, to Eldad's point, which I think is a very good point, I'm not so sure we would be in a position, or would want to be in a position, to turn down the application anyway at that point. What are we going to do? The health department says you have to do it, so he has to do it to have his house. But there might be ways of doing it differently. We've certainly had different kinds of shapes and that kind of thing to some of the expansion areas. I'm open either way, but I think that's a very good point that Eldad's raised.
Well, can we identify the clearing and grading line that is associated with what we prefer as temporary, or something like that? You know, by making it maybe a different dashed line, and say that, well, this is what we prefer, and then put another line out as to Sabrina's point, as to what the maximum would be if the health board said, no, you gotta reverse what you're trying to do.
Would it make any sense to show both as one as an alternative, so the planning board approves both? And
Yeah.
whatever the county decides to do, the applicant would have permission from the planning board to do either one.
Yeah, I think that was Eldad's suggestion. I think, Eldad, that was your point, to try and just make this less onerous in terms of process for the applicant.
Yeah,
That's
just show-
exactly right. Especially if, sorry, Bob.
Oh,
Go ahead.
just show both. Just show both alternatives.
Right, especially, I mean, if there is a way we can indicate that we have a preference and would like the applicant to pursue our preference first, but it was
Yes.
with the intention of making it less onerous for the applicant, but only if we are in agreement that were this to come back to us with the other plan, we would be supportive. And it sounds like we would be. And so it just seems like that would be really all process and no substance at that point, right? And so just be sort of taking additional time from an applicant that has been responsive and has worked with us the whole way.
Well, I at this point, I have no problem with that.
I would agree. I mean, I don't think that we necessarily want to sit through this all over again, and I'm certain that the applicant doesn't. And so that, Bob, if there are any items in the alternate plan that we feel we haven't sufficiently addressed, then I suggest we do it now. And, you know, figure those things out now so that we can proceed based on Bob's suggestion of just have the alternate plan. As
And it would
available.
save the applicant time and money in the future, so he can do both and wouldn't have to come back to the board at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think we would want some sort of codicil that says if the applicant cannot do the preferred plan, that he may proceed with, you know, the overall plan, but we have to be notified to that, or something like that, you know, just in case we have other issues that have come up.
Clinton, can we draft something like this where we basically have a two-tiered approval for administrative expedited reasons?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Well, I don't see any reason why we would not want to do that. In the meantime, as we think about that, are there any comments from the public on this application? Has
Yes,
anyone seen-
Michael Surignano for the Rodriguez family.
Thank you. Okay, yep.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
I represent Michael and Maria Rodriguez. They're at number 19 Heathcote Drive. Michael was made to understand from Dr. Singh early on in this project that the front of Dr. Singh's new house would align with the front of the Rodriguez house. And in fact, as the board knows, this street, starting with the Rodriguez house on that side of Heathcote, every house going the rest of the way up the street are uniformly set back at about the same depth as the Rodriguez house. So the Rodriguezes were very concerned when the first iteration of this plan came before your board, because the house was way in the back, pushed up, and basically loomed over their backyard and was a real threat to their privacy and enjoyment of their backyard. I'll leave it to Brad Schwartz or Jerry to give you the details, but it's my understanding that the house started to get pushed back away from the road as a part of a zoning board discussion or variance application. I don't know the exact details of that. But as Brad noted in his opening, we did meet with Brad and Jerry Barrett at the site. Dr. Singh has acted in good faith here to try to accommodate our concerns. Certainly Brad and Jerry were receptive to my client's concerns. And we appreciate that they have now pulled the house closer to Heathcote by 30 feet. That's a good thing. We appreciate the screening and the fencing. But frankly, we are now satisfied that they've made every good faith effort to pull the house as close to the street as possible, given that Dr. Singh wants this circular loop in his driveway. I don't know that I've understood what the practical need for that is. Maybe it's an aesthetic thing, but I guess the Rodriguezes would just like the board to give some more thought to whether that loop is absolutely necessary, because if the loop were eliminated, the house could come another probably 25, maybe 30 feet closer to the road and be better aligned with the Rodriguez and every other house on the street. But we don't want to tell Dr. Singh how to design his driveway, but if the board felt strongly that maybe that's something that ought to be explored a little bit more, the Rodriguezes would appreciate that. In terms of the septic alternatives, the Rodriguezes certainly would opt for the plan that would cut the least amount of trees, that would leave the most trees standing for as long as possible. So we leave that to the planning board's good judgment. So I guess what I want to say is that we appreciate the good faith efforts Dr. Singh and his team, Brad Schwartz and Jerry Barrett, have made. It's a much better plan in terms of the house positioning, the fencing, the screening, and possibly the alternative septic or the swapping of the 100% expansion with the primary. But we would only ask maybe there'd be a little more discussion about that circular driveway and whether that could possibly be eliminated and pull the house down a little bit more, just to be more in line with the rest of the homes. I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay. Any thoughts on that from board members?
I'd be open to hearing, I appreciate the input from the neighbor. I'd be open to hearing the applicant's thoughts on the circular piece of the driveway.
If I may, I'll just kind of jump in a little bit. I do recall early on, we had some discussions with some of the other neighbors on the street when we were at the zoning board. And the takeaway I had from that meeting was, let's try to keep some let's try to keep some buffering. It's a big home. Let's try to keep some buffering between the street. And I actually thought that was a good idea. And that's why I came out with the 30 feet back from the Tavo approved location, because that gave us the opportunity to get, more buffering and plantings in there. When we came back and tried to move it forward, and the drop off is very important to the Singh family. It is a very gracious house, as it's a very gracious neighborhood, and these types of features are normal and customary. You see them quite a bit in these neighborhoods, and from a functional point of view, what we believe is it really does have a good function. Is that Dr. Singh comes home for lunch or from an appointment, and he's able to spin in and spin out. Guests come; they don't have to go to the back parking court, and there might be cars in there, and execute that 3-point turn. We've tried to be sensitive with this. This is all planted in this area. This is all permeable paving here, so the water's going to go right through it. And it's something that you could see it's normal and it's customary in the neighborhood. This is a parking area type similar feature for the Rodriguez house, not quite the same, but it is kind of a parking area. Here, if you look at the next house down, there's another one right there. So it's not that it's an unusual feature, it's more of a common feature in these homes. Perhaps this is a little bit more elaborate, but this is also much more functional. It's something that the applicant would like, and we think that it can work. If we think we're still going to be able to, get some planting in here and buffer this, we have quite a bit of planting in here. The Rodriguez has this nice evergreens. This has got to be a 30-40 foot hedge right now, and when we plant in here, so I don't know that jog is that much. Of course, changing that architecture now to look out this way, the fencing, we think that we've got a good compromise here, and I think I speak on behalf of Dr. Singh. I think we would respectfully request that we keep that in the plan.
I would add, Jerry, that another feature from a privacy point of view, beyond the fencing and the rather extensive vegetative approach, is that you turn the patio so that instead of viewing to the Rodriguez house, the natural view and everything would be to the west, which is actually better for setting suns and everything.
Are you referring to this area?
Yep.
Yeah, we could certainly do. Well, I started a hedge here, and I could bring this hedge all the way around. This could be a 6-foot solid hedge. It would be a nice little alcove, and it would look right out. So we could certainly do that. But we don't remember, we got a 6-foot fence here. We got evergreen trees, and I think there's a pretty good buffer here. But no, I think that's a good point, and I could certainly change this to an evergreen hedge that could wrap this and make a nice little alcove and nice little private sitting area for reading, or a little nook on the patio with a nice view to his backyard.
Good.
Well, a question for Bob or Alan. Would elimination or reduction of that turnoff, would that have any impact to your stormwater treatment plans? And could it also enable the septic area to be pulled back closer to the house as well in the rear?
Perhaps I can, Alan Pilch, perhaps I'll just speak to that.
Sure.
I think if the house were to be moved forward, it would obviously impact the alignment of the driveway. That's the southern portion of the driveway. And because the slopes there are, getting steeper, I think that would definitely have an impact on the, I'll call it the height of the wall, or on the grading that would be necessary in order to keep the stormwater management where it is. The stormwater management is such a wonderful spot there because it's fairly level, it's gently sloping. The soils were excellent. We had great depth of soil and we had very good percolation rates. And I could see how moving that house forward by another 20 feet or so would impact the alignment of the driveway, and therefore would start to impact it.
why would that happen, Alan, if we just eliminated that circle, just devil's advocate, sorry. If we just moved the house further and eliminated the circle, I don't understand why the driveway would have to change at all. You
Well,
just have a different approach to the house.
If we look at this southeast corner of the house, and
Yeah.
let's say we moved it down to this point, now we're gonna have the
Okay.
southeast corner of the house within a few feet of the driveway.
So
So what does
what I
that
don't
mean?
understand, right, Jerry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is kind of, let's just look at the Rodriguez house plan, right? And the driveway and the that area where they have for parking in front. There is no practical reason that I can figure out why that couldn't be mirrored on the Singh property. I mean, it works for the Rodriguez. I can't imagine it wouldn't work for the Things, but you know, it just seems to me that the evidence is right before us. And this discussion can go back and forth on this subject, but to me, it's not convincing at all. It's sort of a waste of time. I believe that this is what happens, I think, with these larger buildings, the larger residences, and it's all fine. I mean, I have no objections to people wanting to build a big home for themselves. I have no objection whatsoever. But what happens with these larger homes, these sort of estate style homes, is that there is an estate style landscape that goes sort of along with it. It's part of the package. It's part of the complete design. And it's not unusual at all in homes of this size to see circular driveways in front. It's sort of part of how it all works together. Now, does it have to work that way? No, it's a preference. It's not a necessity. I can't imagine the turnaround driveway the loop around there is something that's so necessary because the Singhs and their visitors need to get in and get out real quick. I mean, it's not a drive-through window on a McDonald's we're doing here. The arguments are just weak. And I hesitate to say that, but you know, time is of the essence here. And we really ought to focus on what are the facts of the case and decide whether we want to grant this loop roadway, this loop driveway, or not. And that to me is just straightforward and just get on with it.
So Tom, I agree that the facts are kind of clear and time is of the essence. I completely agree. I'm comfortable with this loop driveway. I don't know that this house needs to mirror the house adjacent to it. I think the applicant has done enough to address any of the concerns. And so I would be comfortable, if that's the question, I'd be comfortable approving this this loop driveway and with the house being sited where it's proposed. I believe, if I'm not wrong, that it's actually sitting where the previous approval, the Tavo approval, had it sitting essentially, and that this board approved, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'm comfortable with this application as it stands.
Thank you. We appreciate you saying that, Eldon.
Well, I concur with Eldon. I think that we've looked at this and we have the precedent of the prior approval. I believe that this is the first house at this end of the street, so it does not have a neighbor, does it? Does it not have a neighbor on the
Not for a
western
long
side?
time. No,
South side.
the other neighbor fronts on 117.
Yes,
So-
but on the other side of the pond.
Correct.
Right. So I think there's some separation there. So I understand the idea of alignment, but I think one of the issues on alignment is to afford as much privacy as possible for people in the backyard. And I think this applicant has demonstrated to us that they've done a very good and reasonable job in protecting the backyard of the neighbor. I understand the concerns, but I think the reason for those concerns has been pretty well addressed by the applicant and his team.
I agree.
Well, I don't agree that that the location, building is, as demonstrated here, is in any way necessary. You know, I think that the building could be pulled up, and I actually think that the building should be pulled up, except that, unless I'm mistaken, and we got guidance, I think, from Clinton, correct me if I'm wrong, last time or the time before we talked about this application, that because there was a prior approval for a building in, excuse me, for a building in this location, that it's hard for us to now go back and say this new applicant can't put his building there. I don't think there are enough circumstances, extenuating circumstances, that would allow us to do that. So I think that we're sort of locked in to this location, and the design falls out from that. I would like to correct something in the record. I believe that when I referenced the Bukowski application and the restrictions that we had put on that applicant, that I did not say for this application that we ought to follow those necessarily. I just said that it was inconsistent for us not to consider that. I really would like to vote no on this application for all the same reasons I voted no on the Bukowski application. But unless I'm mistaken, I'm prevented from doing that. I just can't because of the history of the project. There's already a precedence of approval for the fundamental aspects of this application.
Any thoughts on that, Clinton, on those comments or questions?
I don't know that the siting of the house is so fundamental. I don't know if the siting of the house is a fundamental aspect of this application such that it would be covered by the precedent. And I don't know if the precedent had a circular driveway. I do agree, though, that approving the application now, approving the current application or the proposed application is, you are quite constrained by the precedential value that Mr. Curley referred to.
Oh, so I got that backwards, Clinton, unless I'm mistaken. Are you suggesting that the constraint is that we can't go further than the previous application?
I'm not sure. I was saying that I do believe on approving the plan as presented, as proposed, you are constrained by the previous precedent, that the precedent, this proposal matches by and large the earlier approval, preliminary approval. So in essence, I won't say have to vote yes, but you need to come up with very cogent reasons to vote no.
Okay, well, I guess I'd suggest or ask the question, Clinton, if you can answer it at this point, whether the concerns that I raised and that prompted me to vote no on the Bukowski application, I believe they apply here. I believe the fundamentals apply here. And I'm wondering if that's sufficient reason to allow me to vote no.
My recollection of Bukowski was largely had to do with the upper lot, the lot that's being joined to the street front lot.
Correct.
And it was wetlands up there, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't that it was wetlands so much, Clinton, as that it was part of a series of lots, landlocked lots back there that constituted a greensward back there that also the lot line joining of the joining of those lots with the frontage lots on Heathcote and Cowden Lane would fundamentally transform the neighborhood, and that it would fundamentally transform the neighborhood in terms of the size of buildings and location of buildings and the amount of development that could be put into that neighborhood. And that maybe that's something that the planning board should investigate before any lot lines, before any lot mergers should be approved. And because we hadn't done that study, I voted no, because I thought we weren't really doing our due diligence.
As I recall, this is the last lot to be joined. So for that reason, not so much dealing with this proposal, but with the fact that this is the last lot to be joined with the street frontage, it seems to me that study should have been done 5 or 10 years ago.
Well, it should be done now, because it's not the last lot. There are, I think, 5 more lots, 6 more lots back in there. There are a couple more, or at least one more, I think, that maybe 2 that attach the lots at front Heathcote, and I think there are 3 or 4, I forget, that attach to the lots that front Cowden Lane.
I thought the ones on Cowden Lane had been joined.
It doesn't show in our mapping, town mapping. In any event, I really don't think that we need to, go too deep into that right now. I don't want to hold up this application to revisit that history. I still believe that we should have done a more thorough study of the implications of what we're doing here. And I think that we're doing it again on this particular application. I guess I would vote no, but that there is already a history of this applicant doing what any sane person would do, would take what was essentially approved before and just follow that direction in order to go ahead and build a home in this town. And it's really tough to say, wait a minute, you did the wrong thing. I think that Jerry and Mr. Singh and the whole team has done an excellent job in working with us, as Jerry, as always, does. And Mr. Singh, I really appreciate your working with us. So I guess I would have to vote in this instance. I guess I would have to vote for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a unique piece of property, and with the pond and with the wetland setback, I think that Jerry's team has pulled out of any major disturbance in the wetland buffer, which I think is really a benefit over the original Tavo plan. So I think we've pulled the building out of the back lot by and large. Maybe there's a few feet in one corner or so that slip over, but I think it's consistent with what we did with the Bekowski property. And I think that because of its uniqueness, I'm perfectly content with building on top of the prior outline of the house. And I think that this is a unique piece of property. It has steepness, and it has trees, and it has a big pond. So it is different than any of the other houses heading in to the north. So I'm for it.
All right. Do we have any other comments from the public on this application? Or any further comments?
Just
If anyone's interested in speaking from the public, just raise your digital hand. There's someone on the phone. If you'd like to speak, hit *9 to raise your hand.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
Michael Surignano again for the Rodriguez's. The earlier iteration of this plan, or what had a pool and a tennis court, is it my understanding now, if this is approved, that there'd be a notation or a restriction that no pool or tennis court could be built in the future, certainly in the interior, the formerly landlocked portion of this property? Because then we get into flag lot issues for the Rodriguez's, where there would be real noise and activity and perhaps lighting behind their house as opposed to the side of their house. So what would be the status of Dr. Singh or some future owner of this property's ability to put a pool or a tennis court in the rear portion of this property?
Well, I think there would be a couple, and that would be first zoning compliance. But I think very importantly, I think this board will be drawing fairly tight clearing and grading limit lines. The preferred application keeps bouncing around, but it might reappear here.
I just wanted to show the Tavo plan and the current plan side by side, recognizing, of course, this primary is down here now, and everyone's for that, but where the pool was and the tennis court was on the approved Tavo plan, it was more to the south. I don't think anything could happen here because this is where the septic soils were best and where it would have to stay. So it certainly is not proposed.
Well, and the other thing, didn't we do something with Bukowski that said no permanent structures are to be built in the back lot?
Well, no, we didn't say that. We said that if there was going to be a future application, it would have to fall within those property lines. Now, remember with the other application, I think the property lines protruded over two sides over the neighbors, and certainly to one side far more extensively, excuse me, with far more potential for development than we have with this lot. Dr. Singh's lot does, if merged, does protrude over the Rodriguez property, but to a much lesser degree than the other application. So again, zoning, I think zoning compliance really would be a problem for any application for activity in that section. Plus, we also have clearing and grading limit lines that we are drawing, and that will be memorialized on the plat. So I think those two issues would afford a certain level of protection. Certainly, the clearing and grading limit line would require a revisit to one of the boards for that application. So I think those are distinctions from what we saw last time with the other application. And what we did there was I can't do it myself, but we drew in the protection was it had to stay basically behind the home. And stay within the lot lines, I think the east and west lot lines of the property in front on Heathcote.
All right, points well taken. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, issues, comments from the public?
Yes, Gregory Odland, I'm going to open up your phone line. Just unmute yourself.
Hi all, thank you very much. Greg Odland, I'm at 1 Heathcote Drive. We had submitted a letter on September 25th, 2019. I would just like to have that letter resubmitted. I think some of the issues that were raised in that letter still apply. So rather than going through the whole thing again, I just ask that that be reviewed again with respect to the variance that's being sought and any precedents for some restrictive covenants that were in place as a result of a 1985 on the properties that abut between Cowden and Heathcote. So rather than go through the whole thing, if I could just resubmit that letter and people review it and see if it flies in the face with some of the changes that have been proposed since that letter filing.
Okay, I think we addressed with the other unrelated application, but similar situation. I think, Clinton, correct me if I'm wrong, that we did take a look at some of those restrictive documents, covenants, deeds, and we had determined that they were not binding on the town, that they might be privately enforceable, if enforceable at all. And the issues that we had looked at in the past with regard to resolutions and approvals by the planning board, I think we determined were not terribly clear. And then to Tom's point, during that other application, it was Tom's point that this was the time to now make it clear. And I don't think, you know, the majority of us thought that was appropriate, but that was, I think, one of the reasons that Tom was, you know, objected and wanted to raise his voice of objection in that application. So I guess if we don't have the letter in front of us, and since we're getting close to what I think might be the end of this application, if there are any specific issues that we should be aware of, this is the time we should be aware of them, not when a resolution is being drawn up and being voted on, perhaps the next time we meet. So, Mr. Odland, if there are issues that that really need to be raised, this is the time to raise it rather than just refiling that administratively in the file.
No, it's not, to your point, it was something that was brought up and I wasn't aware that a resolution would be made, but specifically what we're talking about, you know, the part of the letter that we wrote specifically is, you know, some of the issues are established by the existence of restrictive covenants on the property. Those restrictions were set forth in the Declaration of Covenants that were submitted along with the letter, but it was specifically with Reader's Digest and the Flynn Capital Corporation, 1985. And it's Liber 8193, page 133, that states, for a period of 50 years from the date hereof, any construction undertaken on the premises must conform to all dimensional requirements, including zoning and subdivision ordinances. So to the extent that there are applications that seek to redefine those already established covenants, then technically, you know, by the governance of the way that the properties were deeded by the Reader's Digest at the time and established this 50-year buffer on any significant encroachment on those properties, I think it should be addressed. And if the town feels like it's not applicable in this situation, then fine. But I hadn't heard anything to that extent. So I think it's important because that was the reason why, you know, the Reader's Digest put that in originally, to establish that buffer.
Didn't we decide?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Didn't I thought that we decided, Bob Clinton, somebody that we recognize that those covenants may be in place, may not be in place, but that in any event that they weren't binding on the town. Is that correct?
That's correct. And they are still enforceable, but not by the town, by the neighbors. And your member of the public was correct. They do concern what I refer to as the back lot. And I don't believe that anything that your board has approved would breach either of those covenants, either the deed covenant or the declaration of covenants.
One other small point, I guess this new site plan doesn't have any need for a variance from the ZBA or from anybody else, right?
Correct.
That's correct. And frankly, it was in light of the declarations, one of the reasons why Dr. Singh reduced the FAR and eliminated the need for the variance. So I think it's twofold. Yes, not enforceable by the town. And even if it was, we're consistent with the declaration. So because, Mr. Brunel, what you just said, that we are zoning compliant.
Well, you can you are free to argue that point with the abutters and the people who feel that the covenant does apply. You know, go at your you know, at your own counsel on that. But as far as we're concerned, I think that we've established that we're not bound by it. And just to clarify, Bob, when we talked about this before, and my voting no on Bukowski, it wasn't because these covenants were in place or were not in place. It was because I thought that I did say that ought to be cleared up, but I didn't think that the town ought to be the people to clear it up. I thought that the neighbors ought to figure this out and clear it up for themselves. I had understood from Clinton that we were not bound by it.
Right, correct. Good point. Thank you, Tom. Okay, do we have any other questions, comments from the public? Anything lighting the board, Carrie?
I don't see anything. And nothing on YouTube.
Okay, so many channels to check, huh? Okay, well, if we don't see any further comments at this point, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
So that was Tom and then Dick seconding. Any comment, any discussion? If not, I'll take the roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
Dick?
Aye.
Eldad?
Aye.
Bud? Yes?
Yes, aye.
Okay, I'm sorry. And I'm a yes. Sabrina, do we have to readopt a neg deck on this? Because the application
You
is-
do, yes.
Okay,
Yes, you do.
okay. Is there a motion to adopt a negative declaration on the secret for this application, consistent with the last negative declaration?
Motion.
Second. Roll call. Dick?
Aye. Yes.
Eldad?
Aye.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'm yes, so that's 4-0. I guess the next order of action is to direct staff to drop a resolution for the next time next time we can meet and get this done. Is there a motion to so direct staff to drop a resolution?
Motion.
That's all, Dad. Yep.
I have a comment or a question, I guess.
Okay.
We'll have a separate motion for incorporating, all of the things that have to be done before, the real construction starts, right? Or are we including that in this resolution?
I don't follow. We normally have, for example, Bob will have a whole bunch of conditions that will be incorporated. And that's where we normally have those so-called construction ones that we condition. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. So we all, yeah, that's standard. And Bob has indicated that he's comfortable conditioning many of those comments that he had in his memo. So it's consistent with what we normally do.
Actually, I think he said he will accept all of them conditionally.
Right. I think so.
That is
And
correct.
And I think the other issue was a little bit different in this case, was that the board would like to see in the resolution that dual approval approach,
Right.
which Clinton said that we can do, or they can do. They can draft it, we can look at it. All right, is there a second for the motion to direct the staff to drop the resolution?
Second.
Okay, Dick, in favor or not?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Eldad?
Yes.
And I'm yes, so it's 4-0. So I think we're set here. Sabrina, Felicia, you'll just have to let us know when that can be done, and we'll put it on the agenda and be done with it. Okay?
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
very
Mr.
good. Well, thank you very much, team, and thank you very much, Dr. Singh.
Thank you,
and
Mr. Chairman.
guys for working with us.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much. Good night.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, we move now to our second item, and that's a discussion item on Lamini, Sorrel Street, can't find my agenda yet, so I can tell you exactly. Okay, application for steep slopes, stormwater and tree removal for legalization of unauthorized steep slopes and wetlands disturbance, 402 Sarl Street.
Good evening once again. Brad Schwartz for the record from Zarin and Steinmetz. So you'll all remember when the board granted the last extension, you would ask us to come back within 6 months for an update. So we're here tonight to provide you that update, and primarily Alan will be updating the board with respect to his efforts with DEP over these last few months. And the second item is a more of a procedural point that we're hopeful, as you'll hear from Alan, that we'll be getting DEP approval shortly. And if we do, the applicant is willing to move ahead with the Sarl Street improvement work later this year as sort of phase one of the project, while waiting for the spring to do the site work. We know the Sarl Street work was also of critical importance to the board. So we're mindful of that, sensitive to it. And if we get our DEP approval, we're happy to move forward with that road work later this year. Because procedurally, the way the resolution was adopted, all the conditions were folded in one resolution as part of one overall project. So the board procedurally just might, whatever you need to do to authorize staff to work with us in terms of getting a road opening permit to do the road work in advance, assuming your board is amenable to that idea. It's something that we're proposing, and we want to get your reaction to it.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, I talked to Jennifer earlier in the day, and she indicated that administratively, it would require an amendment of several conditions in the approval. But again, this is something that could be done, would not be a real problem. So it really comes down to, hearing from what Alan has to say and getting the disposition of the board on this proposal.
Sure. Good evening, Alan Pilch, ALP Engineering, for the record. I'll just sort of update you as to where we are in the process with the DEP first. So since we last appeared, I guess that was probably in February or so, we addressed the notice of incomplete application. That was back, it was issued actually by DEP in April, and it required some additional things like soil testing, even of the existing infiltration practices that were already installed. And in addition, so that was the first occurrence. So we responded to these comments back in as I said, the notice of incomplete application was in April. We responded in April. We did further percolation testing on the property in May and in June, and had submitted a revised SWIP report to the DEP in early June. And it was in July that the DEP issued its determination that the application was complete. They had several additional comments upon declaring it complete. And at the end of August, we submitted to New York City DEP the updated SWIP report and additional landscape plans and responses to the final comments on completeness. And the comments that they had were all very minor in their extent. So that is why we are anticipating an approval, I'll say shortly, at least that's our hope. We did in the August 20th or the August 2020 SWIP submission we discussed the issue of trying to get the work done on Sarl Street, prior to winter. And it was DEP that recommended that we just set the SWIP up as in 2 phases. And the SWIP is very specific, and then phase 1 consists of the work performed in the right-of-way of Sarl Street, for the drainage improvements, and phase 2 is the on-site work. They're reviewing both of them together. But that being said, Jason Coppola of DEP said if that's the case, they would, the way he let it, he expressed it to me was that we would be able to get an approval for phase 1 so that we can move forward with that work. And I suspect he's probably going to be able to approve all of it, both phase 1 and phase 2 at the same time. So that's essentially where we're at. I'll just also point out that we are in discussions currently with the New York State DEC with regard to the state freshwater wetland across Sarl Street. That's in the lands of Alan Gordon. In August, we had DEC validate the boundary of that wetland. We anticipate receiving the signed wetland validation map. DEC also at that time indicated the work on Sarl Street that we are proposing does not meet thresholds for a municipal general permit. But the DEC is currently reviewing the Sarl Street work to determine if the 100-foot adjacent area general permit might apply. So I just want to make that clear that we're still in discussions with DEC regarding that work. But again, they think they recognize that the extent of work that is being proposed is really quite small with regard to the thresholds that they have that are applicable to permits.
Okay, great.
That's where we are. And as I say, we submitted at the end of August. Here we are 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks later. And, I've been reaching out to Jason and still, I'm awaiting to see if he has any further comments on our responses to the SWIP that we submitted back at the end of August.
Okay. So if we go ahead with this and we approve, move forward, I guess there's some slight chance that the DEP could come up with something that's a little bit of a curve, and that might be a little bit of a risk for the applicant, maybe hopefully no risk based on your assessment. But other than that, it sounds like what you're proposing is going to be consistent with what you anticipate getting approval from both the DEC and DEP.
I would concur with that, correct.
Okay.
I think they did a very in-depth review of the SWIP during this time. Initially it was submitted almost, in September of 2019. And they did a very, very in-depth review just for completeness to levels that were very technically advanced, more so than what I think they usually do.
Alan, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
DEP in their infinite wisdom, did they change anything that we approved as the town, very concerned about flooding, or they just made it better than what it was? They didn't
Are you
take
saying
any of that
DEC or
now.
DEP?
DEP.
I don't think so. I don't think they've changed anything much at all on it. It's
So
still,
I'm very concerned with flooding on the roadway. That's my main concern as town engineer. So hopefully they didn't change that.
no, they've had no comment at all with regard to the work that is proposed within the Sarl Street right-of-way. All of that is exactly consistent with what was initially submitted.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds good to you, Bob? You feel
Yes.
comfortable? Okay.
Yes, so obviously, first and foremost, before I think anything gets done, they'd have to get approval from DEC for the freshwater wetlands permit and approval from DEP, phase 1, phase 2. And those are paramount to get first, obviously.
Okay. And Alan, if we were to move forward now, when would this work be conducted? In advance of the winter, or during winter, after winter?
I would hope if we get all the approvals, let's say, done within let's say a 30-day time frame, it'd be very nice to be able to get this work done during November and December. Usually I'll say the more wintry weather seems to occur commencing in January. So some of that work certainly could get done in November and December. As you might remember, last year it was a very mild winter and a lot of work continued throughout much of the winter. We'll see what this year is like.
Right. Okay. Good.
Guys, if we're going to be working with Brad, would it make any sense to have maybe Brad come up with a recommended idea of what conditions he wants up front, and then maybe if you want us to do it by staff level, Sabrina and I can look at it, and if we're okay, it goes back to the board for approval. Is that the intent here?
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, there are only a handful of conditions, Bob. We had talked about those. There are like 4 or 5 that apply
Right.
just to Sarl Street. And frankly, other than getting a street opening permit and submitting the road improvement plan to the town, I think the other three all related to submitted construction cost estimates and then the bonding amount.
Yeah, I think,
that
Brad, you're
package-
correct. From
I'm
what
sorry,
Jennifer told me, there are 5 different conditions that would have to be looked at and revised: 10, 14, 25, 26, and 27. I don't have those in front of me, but those were the numbers that she had cited.
So we know what
Yes,
they are
I
already.
concur with Jen.
Yep.
Yes.
So I think the ask is if the board would make a motion to just authorize that, and if we get the approval, great, and then at least your board has signed off on it, we can work with Bob, Sabrina, Jennifer, then implement. If not, we'll do it all together, but I trust is in Alan to get this done in a couple of weeks, I hope.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, Brad, because Jennifer gave me some language to propose to the board for such a motion if there's an inclination to follow this. So Jennifer had suggested that the board were comfortable with this, that we would have a motion to direct staff to prepare a resolution permitting the off-site Sarl Street improvements to be implemented separately from and in advance of the approved on-site improvements by restructuring several of the conditions of approval from the Planning Board's May 21, 2019 resolution, subject to receipt of written approval from the New York City DEP and the New York State DEC for the Sarl Street work. Now, you know, I didn't come up with that motion.
It sounded very nice.
But you memorized it very well.
I couldn't do that. You know that. Anyway. So what board members' thoughts on this? I know Eldad, you're probably not as familiar with this application as we are. We've lived with this one for about 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Tom, Dick, are you okay with?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. So, I mean, not Eldad, what we have here is a situation where actually it's very strange. You know, it's something that's being done after the fact, after the applicant did things that were not authorized. And it triggered a wetland application that has to be retroactively approved by the Environmental Review Board. Tree clearing that has to be, I think, approved by the environmental coordinator retroactively. And then we had the steep slopes, and it's been a little bit difficult to sort of coordinate things between the various boards and jurisdictions. So, and of course, then we have the state and the city involved as well. So one of the issues was issues were the impacts to be mitigated on Sarl Street from some of the work that the applicant pursued. So, and then there's more to be done later on, a very, very involved planting plan and mitigation plan that stormwater plan that Bob and Alan and their team have been working on now for a couple of years. So there's the summary.
Got it.
Sorry. Anyway, is there therefore someone would like to, I guess I made that motion. Will we have a second on the motion that Jennifer drew up so nicely for me?
Second.
Second.
Okay. We'll go around, I guess, on a vote on this. Tom?
Aye.
Dick?
Yes.
Eldad?
Yes.
And I'm yes, so it's 4-0. So we'll move forward in that direction.
Perfect.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, applicants, and good luck with your plans with DEP and DEC.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Good
it.
night.
All righty, thanks. Good evening.
That was easy.
Okay, we move now to our next item, our featured event. This is an informal appearance before the board. This is the Chappaqua Crossing East Village MFPD. Site development plan approval, planning board application for wetlands permit, steep slopes permit, tree permit, and stormwater pollution prevention plan approval, 480 Bedford Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Andrew Tung.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Here on behalf of the Chappaqua Crossing team, Dave Walsh, Felix Charney, Greg Otis, and James Fitzpatrick from Toll Brothers, Mark Weingarten, and my associate Matt Steinberg. We have made a submission in August in response to the comments last discussed with you earlier in the spring, primarily the town engineer's comments. We've been guided over the past several months with a number of contacts with town staff for which we are very appreciative. As part of that submission in August, there were full-size drawings, there were detailed responses to the comments. There was a matrix as requested by your board to help track the comments, as well as a separate integrated CPAC and Loop Road site plan. During the past week, we've received comment memos to you from the town engineer, the town planner, and the environmental coordinator. We'd be happy to address those, to go down our matrix, or to handle this in any way that you would like.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing, why don't we, Sabrina, would you lead the charge with your memo? Because I think your memo.
We can't hear you, Bob.
Yeah,
You are now muted.
Finally. Must be the batteries.
I mean, I know what he wants me to do, but Bob?
Yes.
VSP, Sabrina?
I think he's back.
All right. So, okay. All right. Good.
Am I here?
You are present.
Okay.
Okay. So I can provide you with my review. Really, you know, as mentioned previously, the planning aspects of the site plan are pretty much done. They're consistent with zoning compliance. It's really just a nitty-gritty in regards to the town board resolution and your review of this project. You know, we've talked about the timing of applications. I think that we'd like an update on the master subdivision, you know, just to kind of keep track of where this subdivision is in relation to the master subdivision. But the biggest thing, and Andy, I think when we met and we did the workshop last week or the week before, you know, one of the last things that we talked about was updating the environmental analysis. And we know that there are differences between the town board's environmental determination, the last consistency check, if you will, for lack of a better word, that this board had done, and then changes in your application, you know, the basements, the increase in impervious surface, the number of bedrooms, all of that has been part and parcel to the discussion and to the site plans that the planning board has been reviewing. But I really need an update on the environmental aspects of this so that I can kind of complete and trace back the seeker record so that the board can make their decisions. You know, and that's kind of what my memo says, because there's really no outstanding issues in regards to zoning compliance or planning. It's really just carrying through on seeker.
Okay.
So that's kind of all I need to say. And then, you know, I think maybe turning it over to Bob, who really has examined, you know, the engineering aspects of the plan, and you know, and I can say, and Bob is more intimately involved, but I think that the project has moved along nicely when it comes to design. I know with the guest house, Tom DePole, he had submitted a letter to the planning board talking about his review of the guest house and different inspection points and whatnot. We've met and we can accommodate that through the demolition permit and make it conditions of the planning board's approval. So I think we're in good shape. You know, it's really up to the board to kind of feel comfortable with where we are. So Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about your review.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sabrina. Good evening, everyone.
Sure.
Of course, I'm a guy with numbers, and I just added up all the comments I originally had. They were originally 47, believe it or not, and I have 14 left, which is pretty good. I'm just going to focus, guys, on 1, 2, 3, 5 of them tonight. I feel they're kind of important to go over. I'm going to start with ST1. I don't know if you want to share the screen, Matthew, on these things to bring up my red line markups that might be helpful, if you can bring those up. You're going to bring up the sheet SP7 format. That's the one I'd like to talk about. Piece of planning board, just so they know what I do right now, guys, makes, I think, my life and their life a lot easier. I use their PDFs, and what I do is I put all my comments on the drawings the old-fashioned way, which I used to do 20 years ago. So I just put it on PDF, and I think it's easier. So basically, let me start here on SP7.4. Basically, make it real quick. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but let me show you what I'm doing. Annotate, draw. You see these 4 areas, 5 areas? I'm concerned with the overflow, because this overflow basin right here is going to come down and overflow right here. And I want to make certain when it does, these structures that I boxed in can handle the flow, because the last thing I want to see is this thing get clogged up with the overflow over here on the left side and then flow out to the street. So I've asked them to do hydraulic analysis to make certain the existing structures can take the flow when that overflow weir is used. Because if they don't, what would happen is it may possibly go into the street and then go down to the wetlands, which would not be a good thing. So that's, I think, a pretty critical comment they should address sooner than later, which is part of the stormwater comments. So that's ST1. The next one I'd like to go to is comment ST5. And really, you keep the same one up there, Matt, because it applies to the retaining wall. Basically, there's about a, let me draw free flow. Right here, guys, about a 75-foot retaining wall. I think it ranges anywhere from 5 to 6, 7 feet. I just want to make certain they do their due diligence, and I outlined it in ST5 to do the structural analysis, which I think they retained a consultant to do, is to make sure that the surcharge from the water and also the surcharge from this additional fill will not overtax the way the system and the wall was designed previously. So that's critical that gets done, because there's a possibility, worst case scenario for both scenarios, ST1, ST5, they may have to rebuild this system to take into account the flow, and this wall may have to be rebuilt or at least structurally reinforced based on whatever the engineer comes up with those. So those are 2 big items. ST5. So the next one is GC7 on my comment list. And GC7, I got the distinct impression that the applicant has some concerns about it. Basically, it has to do with the water main, that in discussion with the Commissioner of Public Works, would like to have another tie-in point coming in off of Cowden and going up in a westerly direction to hit one of the new roads on the East Village. They're pretty clear in their response that they don't believe it should be done. I would recommend here, I'm going to kind of pass the buck here to the commissioner and meet with staff internally and town council, and then have a meeting with their attorney and their staff to see how we can resolve this, if at all. So that's GC7. Right now, I can't say much about it.
Yeah, before we leave that, I think it's important to know also that, you know, the board has looked at this a couple of times, and while we haven't weighed in necessarily on the detailed engineering aspect, I think the board has indicated to the applicant that the board favors the loop for emergency services, for flow reasons, and the reasons that we have heard from the commissioner of DPW. So if there's some sort of change, that's something we should hear about. But I think the applicant should understand that, at least my understanding in our discussions, is that the board was leaning towards supporting the commissioner and to seeing that loop completed.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, once we have our meetings, I'm sure either the applicant or town staff will prepare a memo for the board to look at, to see what our findings are.
Mhm.
To keep you guys in the loop, of course.
Thank you.
So that's what we'll do there. And just so the applicant and the engineer and the attorneys know, and Felix knows, of course, I will schedule a meeting with that probably next week. So everyone's on the same page, and it'll probably be a Zoom meeting. And that handles that comment. The next comment I'd like to see, which is 4 out of 5, is NC1. I think, Matt, it'd be helpful if you can bring up Exhibit 5, which is MPT1. So the board can kind of see what we're talking about. Okay. I think that all in all, they presented a nice conceptual layout of how they present and how they plan to do the MPT plan during the construction of the loop road to make certain. And this was a town board request as well, and they looked at this quite closely. I'm just following their guidance on what the applicant should do to make certain it's done. So they presented a nice conceptual plan, and what they're going to do in general is pretty much guide the traffic through the parking lot during the construction of the loop road, which is the only practical place to really run it. But they have a nice guideline of what they want to do. I'm just looking for more technical details on it. So all of these items I presented on here in my red boxes is really just more detail to show basically a sign plan, clearly demarcate the designated route in the parking lot for the traffic, to put more detour signs up, but more detailed construction signs. So when it is enacted on by their contractor and we go out to inspect, we have a clear idea of what they're doing. But I think in concept, to me, I'm comfortable with the goals that the town board had intended. Of course, keep in mind this has to be looked at by the police chief as well, but I think they did a good job of doing a conceptual layout on it. So a lot of my comments are technical comments with bring it to the next level. And that's what I pretty much try to outline here and try to stress and get across to Felix's team doing their plans. So that takes care of NC1. I do have a comment also too, which we can keep the same up though. On the auditorium, they did a nice job showing what they're doing out there, but I just want to make certain that, and it's one of my comments, Andy, it really refers to you guys. And I think on the auditorium, you got to be very clear on exactly with the basically utilities, because I had discussions with Jerry Marshall and their building department, and I think maybe we might have to have a meeting on this too internally to go over it. But we want to know exactly where your tie-in points are and what you're doing and what you're not doing with basically the utilities, i.e. the gas, telecommunications, water, sanitary, and stormwater. And I don't want to bore everyone's time now with the nitty-gritty on it, but I think it would be good to have a meeting with some of your staff, Andy, to see exactly how this is going to be handled in the field and during construction on the stuff we have to do and the stuff you have to do when it pertains to all of the utilities. And there are several utilities out there, so it gets a little bit involved. But I think that could be handled at a staff level meeting. Do you agree, Andy?
Yes. We'd also invite Dave Walsh, who knows the area around the auditorium in great detail.
Okay, so I'll coordinate that as well. Last comment I have is on the, yes, did someone have to say something? Andy, or no? Okay, my last comment of the ones I felt were important is, Matt, could you pull up the blow-up version of the subdivision, preliminary subdivision map? Could you zoom in, Matt? Let me show you. Could you zoom in an area like on one of these streets, like right here? One thing I do know, and I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, that if you notice, they have the water line and they have the sanitary sewer. Of course, all of this is going to be dedicated to the town. And I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, there's going to be water, there's going to be sewer, there's going to be telecommunications. Is there going to be gas, Andy?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, there's going to be gas and there's going to be electric. Now, that's a lot of utilities to fit in a 20-foot wide road. I don't know how you're going to do it. I would recommend when you get down to the detailed drawings, you're going to really have good detail on how you're going to do it. But one thing I did notice, and I don't know how good an idea it is, you realize that when you have these easements for the sanitary and water, which is going to be dedicated to the town, portion of the easement right here is going to be on the private properties of those parcels. Now, is that what you intend? Would it make any sense, just food for thought, guys, to put the sanitary and the water in such a positioning and just have the easement in between the common areas? So we don't need easements over private lots. Just food for thought. I don't think we're going to resolve it now. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I don't know if the planning board has any opinion on that or any ideas or would like to discuss it further, but I just wanted to bring it up. And I'm gonna turn it over to Robert now. And that ends my comments. I'm going to turn it over to Robert. Robert, if he wants to further discuss this, any.
Well, the question I had on that, I guess, would be, Bob, is this is driven by the rules in terms of what minimum separation be between certain kinds of utilities?
That is correct. As everyone knows, Andy can attest to it, the county is a stickler on having 10-foot separation between water and sewer. So, you know, they have to be very creative to do this. And I don't even know if they're going to be able to have easements within that area where the roadway is. But I believe, Andy, that's only 20 feet wide. I didn't see a dimension, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think that area, which is going to be common area, will be, I think, 20 feet. I didn't see a dimension on the plat, but that's one of my comments.
Yes, that's correct. I think that the survey may have slipped here. We'll need to check with the surveyor because I agree with you, Bob. The gray area should correspond to the area between the lots. It may have been an earlier version of the roadways. We'll have to double check that. But your comment is well taken. We'll take care of it.
Okay, so, you know, that would kind of make sense. I think there's some areas where it's going to be kind of tough and there may be some encroachments onto these fee simple lots. Well, you know, not all of them, but as long as you're aware of the situation, it'll be resolved and we can take a look at it once you revise the maps. Thank you, Andy.
Bob, this is Dick. 20 feet does sound like just a small amount. And if it's 10-foot separation, that's a horizontal separation. You also have to have a vertical separation. And then you're going to have pipes from each side, either going over the sewer or you know, going over the water line to get to the sewer, or deep diving. And that's probably what's going to happen. You're going to have a double L kind or a double.
Well, keep in mind,
kind of system.
Keep in mind, Robert, that's a good point you brought up. You're going to have gas service, you're going to have gas main, you're going to have electric, telecommunications, water, and sewer. And each and every one of those need minimums. And I don't know, and this is something they really have to look at, keep it in that 20 foot. Is there any way, Andy, you would know more than anyone, could that 20 foot be widened out to encapsulate, incorporate all the utilities so the utilities wouldn't be going and encroaching onto the fee simple properties?
I believe Toll has done this in many places, Bob. I don't think it's going to be an issue to fit that all in there. We will double check it and run it by you, but I don't think it's going to be
Good enough.
Hey, Andy, it's James. Also, our HOA docs they always have blanket language that allows for utilities to run over, under, through, you know, in between fee simple lots that are servicing like the common community.
Okay, so, okay, but I think it would be wise to keep the water and sewer inside that area. And like Andy said before, make certain all the easement, at least 99% of it, of the easement area that's going to be dedicated to the town is inside that 20-foot strip.
That's correct. That's our
okay.
intent as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, James.
Okay. Bob, do you want to take a look at the applicant has submitted the update to the matrix. Anything on here that is different from what you've outlined in your memo? Or is it basically just a graphic representation of what you've got in your memo?
Yeah, basically, it's just what my memo has. So, I went through that, and I think I circulated it to the board. I just went through it as a guide, and it pretty much mimics what my comment memo says. So that's really all I did with that. And I think I did send it out to the planning board as well. I did mark that up.
Yep. Okay. Good.
Yeah, the things they don't have on there now, though, Andy, it's a good point, Robert. You don't have the preliminary subdivision comments, which I guess you'll add to the matrix now as well.
We will. We have not updated the matrix yet with your comments from this week.
Thank you.
And I guess the matrix did not include the seeker evaluation as well that Sabrina mentioned.
Yes, it should include Sabrina's too.
Yep.
We can add that. There's also a few new comments from the environmental coordinator that we will add.
Right. Why don't we take those comments from Dennis at this point? Dennis, try to keep this hot topic of the males and females as general and G-rated as possible here. This has the potential of being one of the hottest planning board meetings ever.
Wow, A, I'm happy that you actually read them, and B, I did bounce, I'm not going to lie, I've been married a long time, and I have bounced this off of my wife to, like, it's a public audience, I'm going to keep it G, and she basically gave me the you better. So, having said that, when I came upon even, a little over a year ago, I know Steve Coleman had, written, I guess, one of his last review memos for this project. And, I know that there was an extensive, almost redesign request, for the berm area and whatnot. So I've, taken more the approach. If you're reviewing my memos, they even may appear to be more nitpicky than anything, because I'm just, making sure that I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and, certain things I'm able to follow and make sense to me. So that's just, reflective of my site plan drawings, comments. I thank the application team this afternoon for helping me address SP 9-1, because I did get that updated table, and that's now part of my files. Yes, as part of the general comments, these are just some things that I point out. Obviously there's a lot of plants, there's a lot of planting locations, and, whatever jumps out at me from review. And, you could even look at the literature and, landscape websites, botanical documents. Hawthorn is not human friendly when it flowers. And I'll just leave it at that. So when I saw some of the locations of those trees proposed so close to residential units, I'm like, I just figured I would point it out and say, you may just want to reconsider and along pedestrian pathways. And then not for a different reason, obviously, I was focusing on the rain gardens because, they're obviously distributed in different areas throughout the site. And understandably, I do think Winterberry, especially, the females, when you look at, just going through what was constructed for the retail, rain gardens in winter, it's nobody's fault. We're in the Northeast. There's, they don't look that spectacular, but Winterberry has sort of the potential to, definitely add some color and, sign of life to the rain gardens. And I'm happy with that particular species, but just the location of some of them, because of their isolation, statistically the numbers are fine, typically if you did a 1 to 5, but, because they're not sort of planted in, loose clusters, for lack of a better description, because some of them are just out there, I'm like, gee, you're going to not get your effect that you may want with having the, those females pop and actually produce berries. So I was just suggesting, just maybe an extra male just to statistically, increase your chances of having someone survive and hopefully, pollinate. So that basically ended my comments. It was just to focus on those, from the broad range, just those two species and those two comments.
Okay, great, thank you. I know we did get that memo from the building inspector regarding the demolition plan. And we got that, I think, last week. I think, Tom, you had also some comments specifically in response to Tom's memo. And I thought that those should be raised and discussed as well.
Well, my only concern was when I read Tom's memo, which I thought was excellent, and really gave a heads up as to the complexities of, getting at this old building to do the demolition without threatening the building itself. It seems to me that there are a number of areas where things might go wrong, and was just wondering, I have no opinion about this because it's not my expertise, but wondering if it was appropriate to bond that activity so that if something did go wrong, there was a way to ensure that the old building, would be fixed.
So anyway, Bob or Clinton, what are your thoughts on that?
I would have to look at the town code to see whether or not it is bondable. I believe that it probably is. And I believe that if you want to impose a bond, you can. I don't know. I know even less about demolition than Mr. Curley does, but I would assume that a bond would be reasonable.
I know for the site work, we always, and of course it's in the code, Clinton, to your point, we always have performance bonds. Maybe we can craft something with legal advice on how to have a performance bond that, Thomas and I look at to make certain and ensure that it's done in proper accordance with the plans as approved by the board.
Well,
can I ask a question? It's Felix. Am I allowed to speak? Is this public?
Absolutely, of course.
Okay. Well, good evening. I've seen you guys in a really long time. I think we're right around our third anniversary. It feels like I've lost touch with my relatives here. Anyway, Tom, is your concern that while we're doing work on the guest house that we accidentally, knock a wall down despite our efforts not to, and you're thinking about some sort of a bond to make that repair? Is that where you're headed with that question?
That's essentially, that would be one example. And there are parts of the demolition, the memo from Tom talked about a lot of instances where demolition was going to be done around and within the building. And, I just don't know for myself just how vulnerable the building would be to that not being done properly. And I'm not here to say that we need a bond. I'm just asking the question of folks whether that would be appropriate.
Well, I was just trying to understand what your concern was. So wouldn't logic conclude, so we have to convert this into a clubhouse. The clubhouse is an integral part of the total development. So if, during the demo process, if something goes awry or something breaks, there's no one more motivated to correct it and fix it than ourselves because we need a clubhouse. So, am I missing something? Are we not incentivized by our own desire to complete a quality project to rectify anything that goes wrong during demo?
Well, you're incentivized by, unless I'm mistaken, your obligation by the town that you will keep that building and make it into a clubhouse. If that's not, is that true?
Well, of course, I think we're obligated to, well, from a development standpoint, we're building a clubhouse, and then the town required us to be to maintain certain historic characteristics and to integrate them into the clubhouse. And the two are not mutually exclusive. We need to make that occur as one event that results in a compliant renovation to meet your requirements and a working clubhouse to meet ours. So my point is, during the demo process, which of course something could go wrong, we're more incentivized than anyone. You're certainly not going to step in under a self-help provision of a bond and correct something that we broke. We're going to be fixing it while we're out there in the field to the best of our ability to ultimately end up with a high quality clubhouse. So I was just, you know me, I'm going down the logic road.
No, and I'm going down the logic road with you. And I had forgotten that you are obligated to use that building and to as a clubhouse, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah. So
part of sorry, let me just finish. It's part of the approval process. So if that's the case, then I don't think a bond's necessary because you're going to have to fix it anyway.
That's my point. Thank you.
I agree with you.
Trying to understand. Yeah. Okay.
So I withdraw my comment.
All right.
So noted.
I withdraw what I said too before.
Right. What else can we get off the table?
That's your all-time high, Felix, one in a row.
Yeah. I'm close to retirement, guys. So, you know, any kind of a win streak here would be helpful. I'd like to end on a good note. What else is on your list, Mr. Kirkwood?
I had a couple of comments or questions, not so much on are there any questions or comments from the applicant on anything that we've talked about this evening? Anything that is not understood or anything that we think or you think is incorrect or something that we need to talk about now to give some better direction to staff or us? And if not, then we can entertain other issues that we may, want to talk about. So I think we should do that. So, I mean, Andy and James and your team, is there anything here that seems to be more outlandish than usual or inconsistent with your thoughts?
Speaking from the planning side, I don't think so. I think it's quite clear, and Bob Seoli's been very helpful in helping to clarify his comments on as we have gone along. And I think that we can now address them for the most part, quite quickly. There were some remaining comments, and I think we boiled it down to 8 that will survive the planning board's review, such as Department of Health approvals that have to come after that, that we would propose, and in some cases Bob has also proposed or suggested that they be conditions of the site plan approval.
Right.
But other than that, I think we're ready to move forward with making those final corrections, and we're ready to move forward, if the board is, with scheduling a public hearing.
And I think the other issue is that Sabrina raised are also critically important too, so we can move forward with the seeker write-up, and so we can complete our analysis. And then where are we on the master subdivision that we looked at last spring? Where is that at this point?
The master subdivision, I'm pleased to report, was submitted to Department of Health. And as of September 16th, we received a comment letter that the town was copied on. There are a number of clarifications they asked for in the plat that we're working with the surveyor on. There were also a couple of will serve letters that the town needs to provide to us. And those are in the works, as I understand. So we've made good progress with the county health department, even during their constrained hours at their office.
Right.
And, they've been helpful in moving this along as well. So I think
Terrific.
in good shape.
Okay, great. I had a couple of questions. One was really a very quick, fast one, and that was really, it was something contained in Sabrina's memo, just for clarification for my own edification, but point number 11, in there, it was mentioned that the applicant has indicated that improvements to the Chappaqua Performing Arts Center will occur over a 4 to 6 week period, and that the improvements will be performed by others. Who are the others? What does that mean?
Those are contractors.
So contractors that will be hired by the applicant, the town, in conjunction with both? Who's doing the work? You don't have to name the name. It's not that. It's just, so it's not going to be done by Dave's team?
No, it
Dave
is
Walsh's
going to be
team?
done by Dave Walsh's team, yes.
Oh, okay. You're the others?
I guess
He's
I'm the
the-
other, yeah.
Okay, no
I've
problem.
been called worse, Bob.
It just seems like you're sliding down on that totem pole there a little bit. So
You know, that's what happens.
Okay. Can we see a blow up of the area around the Chappaqua Pack? And I'm no good at the Zoom stuff, so you'll have to bear with me in terms of pointing out things or asking. So one of the things that you've changed here, and I guess jointly with the town, is the configuration of the front steps coming in. The old steps, the slate steps are going to be pulled up. You're going to realign the steps, and that's fine. That's great. My concern is actually blew it up a little bit too much, but across the street, I still have this concern with the parking and the pedestrian movements to get to the pack. And I can't recall what the lighting plan is in that parking lot, but the issue I have is what we're really doing is we're directing people from the auditorium to basically walk through a parking lot. And it seems to me, I had mentioned, I thought before I was still a proponent of another loop that would go into the parking lot a little bit further to the north. In that one little cutout all the way, let's see, at the very end of that parking area, there's sort of like a little cutout that seems to be fairly level. And I always thought that would be a good thing to have. But aside from that, notwithstanding what we do there, it seems to me that it would be appropriate somewhere to have some sort of pedestrian walkway going from where that retaining wall is to match up in that berm or whatever that area is, grassed area, and meeting up with the sidewalk or having a sidewalk along the road. Directing people out of an auditorium with a crowd and just having them walk amongst a parking lot doesn't seem to be the appropriate solution. So you have a sidewalk going to the south, going down toward the village itself, but the parking lot, the sidewalk that comes from the main stairwell just directs into one segment of the parking lot. So it just seems to me that we need something more in terms of design to get people out of the parking lot, get them onto a sidewalk sooner than later to cross over to the pack. And by the way, my little loop doesn't really satisfy that issue. So
Andy and Matt, there's no little cursor here. Did you follow what Bob was trying to highlight? I got a little lost.
Well, there would be a potential to extend a sidewalk along the west side of the loop road and then cut back to the parking lot.
Yep.
But I'm not sure that, right. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, good. Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
That
That was sort of the idea, Andy, exactly right. And then have it curve down there somewhere, before the retaining wall.
Andy, wouldn't the grades there be a little too steep for that, or?
The grades may be too steep in there.
You could do steps.
We're raising the loop road, so we can no longer make that connection that you see today, Bob, where you had a loop connection. With the raising of the loop road, that may not be practical.
Right, okay.
So I think the lighting is best along the drives in the parking lot. So I think that, you know, in terms of exiting the center and then going across the street, that's basically how you get through that parking lot in the safest manner, or in the most lit manner.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Andy. It broke up a little bit.
The sidewalks that show here in dark gray, we've extended into the parking lot on both sides of the aisle. We've also extended them back towards the village center if people want to, if there's a restaurant open, if we have restaurants again someday, if there's a restaurant open, walk along that sidewalk and join up with the retail sidewalk system. So you're well connected as you leave the CPAC.
Right. Well, and that blue drawing, that the sketch that you put on there with the cursor, what do you think about a sidewalk going along the road and heading down, and then, as Dick said, having steps go down to the parking lot?
We can look at the grading. I don't know offhand what the we'd have to look at the grading in that area.
Okay. And then further down to the north, you're saying that the grading, because of the change in the loop road elevation, it's too steep, a drop going back down into that, yeah, a little further north.
Right,
Yeah.
because that wall that you see along the west side there, you know, holds up the raised loop road. So that would be too steep to get down to.
Okay. Okay. How high is that wall in that, say that northernmost spot?
I think, you know, we're raising the loop road 10 feet, so it's probably about 10 feet at this height.
Okay.
And you can see the contours as you get closer to the south end of that wall is probably 4 to 5 feet of grade. So I'm not sure that you're gaining anything that you would not. I think that's a more, it's an easier walk just to go down the sidewalk and then go into the parking lot.
Okay. Well, if you could look at that and see what the grades look like.
Yeah.
Again, I always think it's better to have people walking on sidewalks rather than in the middle of a parking lot. And presumably it will be a busy parking lot either before or after a performance, and that's going to be the main parking lot. So if we can deflect some of that, it might be a safer approach.
So Bob, if I can, I agree with you. I know that we did talk about this before, and I understand that raising the loop road might make this a little bit more difficult, and the farther along you go down the loop road, I think the more difficult it is. But somewhere along the line of where it says, where that looks like this drainage line is going into the parking lot, right around in there, I think that the finished grade, according to the drawings, finished grade, the crown of the loop road looks like it's at about, I don't know, 406. And I think that it's 402 at the parking lot. So I'm not sure that this is something that can't be done. It just isn't done. You know, it's done sooner along the road rather than later, and I think that's better anyway.
And
yeah,
I agree with Tom. I still like that idea.
I think it has to be done. I mean, I'm looking at this facility, and Felix, you tell me, but I mean, if I'm looking for a pad site for a use like this, and I've got a crush load for my events of people coming and a crush load leaving, and I've got a situation here where people, once they pass the facility, dropping people off at the front door, which they're going to want to do. I mean, they're going to want to do it. They've got no recourse. They have to keep on going all the way down the loop road and come back. If I was a tenant looking for a crush for a facility like this, and the parking lot is so far away down the slope, and I have to have people walking through the parking lot, and then make a left turn and finally get up to the building and cross the road, I wouldn't take this site. It's just, it seems to me that we need to recognize that this is.
Not even for $1?
So Felix, tell me what it would cost. I just wondered, I mean, you don't have to answer the question, but it seems to me that somebody saved you some money on demolition of that thing.
Well, hindsight is
let's not
everything.
have that discussion.
Hindsight's everything, and it's a wonderful amenity for the city. But this has been a gift that keeps on giving, not in a positive way, to those of us who gave it.
Well, you're free to feel that way. I would think that this done properly returns to the value of every tenant on the property. I mean, it just does. I believe it does.
Well, yeah, I know. We spent nearly 2 years negotiating the additional land that was required around it. So there's, it's been a long and windy road. So we want to get the project finished. We want to do the best we can. And I think Andy highlighted some areas where we can look at maybe expanding or extending the sidewalk and looping it into the parking lot. And, we're happy to do so.
Very good.
So we hear you.
Okay. So again, I would echo Tom's comment also in that area. If it's done sooner and the elevation works, and if Andy can come up with something, I really think that makes a lot of sense, because we all know that that's what's going to happen, especially when we have inclement weather, which we have all winter. People are going to be dropping people off in front, and it's going to be a little bit of, and of course, trying to pick up people afterwards too. So I think it really would help as a pressure relief device on traffic and safety.
I have a small point that helps is that if we look at where the steps are, and then you go out to the steps to the road, you have a sidewalk that crosses the entryway, but why can't that sidewalk be extended another 30 or 40 feet to allow 2 or 3 cars to unload, and then enable them, because they're not handicapped, they would go spin to the left and get down into the right place. I think that helps a little without getting a lot of money in the way or a lot of other things in the way.
Now, anyway, I think those are, if Andy could take a look at those again, I think it would help us.
We
get
will.
this thing going.
Another way to do it is to somehow direct traffic to the auditorium through the parking area, so the cars can come through the lot and then drop the people off on the other side of the road, and they can use the crosswalk to get over there. That could be done with some signage, perhaps.
That works.
Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
Yeah.
On the application? Sure, Tom.
I have 2 more. One has to do with landscaping around the units, and another has to do with, and I'm going to come back to this, which I think it's a problem, the speed bumps on the loop road going back down to the Parkway. We talked about the speed bumps before, and I suggested that there were other ways to do it, which actually are probably the more appropriate ways to handle the crosswalk problem. And you see them in towns everywhere. You see the solutions in Chappaqua. Proper crosswalks with, whatever lights are required in order to make that work. And the speed bumps, we're going to have a situation where we've got, 92 units now, or 91? I forget what it is. And these are people who are going to be living on site. And in order for them to go in down to the Sprain, I promise you, they're probably not going to want to go over to the other road and make a right turn past the school and go down. They're going to want to take what is now a back way to get back down there. And right now it feels like it's a back street, a back road, It has speed bumps on it that are really make it uncomfortable to drive. And it's like a leftover part of the property when in fact it's going to be one of the most important roads on the property. And I don't understand why we can't have it so that people who live here have a roadway system which is equal to the lifestyle that they are buying into, instead of this read like a back road with a bunch of speed bumps on it. I think that it actually, I've talked about this before, it actually inhibits the function of that roadway the way it was planned in the original traffic, I think, assumptions, that a certain number of cars were going to be going that way. And we wouldn't have cars on those cars on Roaring Brick Road where you have a real traffic concern, that it'd be feeding off of there. And this is something that I believe is going to inhibit that move. And I think that we need to get it up to speed to what was anticipated in the traffic studies, and up to speed to make it more appropriate to the community that this development's being put in. I don't understand why it's a problem.
I believe and Dave can help me on this, I believe the speed bumps have been put there because people were basically speeding on that road. Now, there's been on the property when when those bumps went in. And Dave, would there be a way to revisit whether they're needed at this time, or what's your observation out there?
Look, in my opinion, in respect to Tom's opinion, those speed bumps are absolutely needed. They have been requested by two of our largest and most important tenants there, our medical tenants. And, they have slowed down the traffic on that loop road, which has become a raceway and always was, even when it was Reader's Digest, it was a raceway. They had temporary bumps out there for years and years, back in the day. And we thought when we paved that portion of that loop road, that in response to speaking with our tenants, that it would be a good idea to put the permanent bumps in there for a number of different reasons. As I said, I guess it was 9 months ago, whenever this came up originally, it might be a year ago now, it's hard to put them all together, that there have been instances out there prior to those being installed where we've had people almost get hit by cars. They come down that hill, which is a little bit of a blind spot, and they come down at quite a fast rate. I don't see any, and I'm not a professional traffic engineer, but I don't see any issue with, people wanting to go to the sawmill, whether they're in the retail, office, or residential components, going down that way. I think most people, appreciate the bumps and understand why they're there. And I think it's something that you get used to, and I've seen it in many communities. That's just my layman's version of what's happening there.
Okay, so my version of it is that the way the solution has been proposed by you guys right now is that that's the only solution, and that it was something that was requested by your tenants, and that there is no other way to do it, and that's just not true. Now, the tenants may have said put speed bumps in because speed bumps was somebody said, how about some speed bumps? And they say, yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm not sure that this is the right way to go about planning this thing. There are plenty of devices that are perfectly acceptable that are used all over the country and in our town to solve this problem that aren't speed bumps. I mean, it's just true. And it's just a question of investigating those and coming up with a design, the best design that is appropriate, looked at by traffic engineers in the town and whoever are the real experts in this matter, and looking at that solution compared to speed bumps and decide which is best. And I do believe that other devices can be used, other measures can be used that perfectly satisfy the safety problem, but also satisfy this as a roadway, which is really an important road on the property and an important exit for people an entrance for people who live here.
I understand, Tom, and I absolutely know that there's other means out there. For years, there were flashing yellow lights at 2 locations coming down the hill and then coming up the hill from either direction. And, nobody ever really slowed down. But, certainly we can look at it and see if there's something else other than the flashing lights, because I'm not sure that they would do anything. Maybe we can put a smaller rumble strip type thing in there. I don't know. But I would have to talk to the traffic people to figure that out. Right now, for me, it's a safety thing and it's a safety issue for our tenants. So something is definitely needed there, and we'll just have to look at maybe another application.
Okay, I just want to be clear that it's not that it's not a safety issue for us.
No, I understand that. I'm
Okay,
just
very
saying,
good. Well, thank you for
I'm
looking
emphasizing
into
the point that it's certainly a safety issue for us.
Right, I appreciate that. So thank you for looking into it.
No, absolutely.
And there's one more which has to do, Bob, if I may.
Sure.
Which has to do with the landscaping around the units. The landscape plans are great, and I really think that this neighborhood is shaping up, really well. I think it's going to be, pretty terrific. But I do have a concern, and this may be a minor point for everybody, but me, and it's really not a major point for me. But the design of the units and the design of the neighborhood, Toll Brothers has done a really good job in finding ways to put a product on the market which differentiates between each unit in terms of its architectural presentation. And these shouldn't call them row houses because that's not a term that's used these days. We'll call them townhomes. That in these rows of townhomes, you can pick out and identify a unit from unit because of the selection of materials and the architectural facade and so on. And it's going to be very successful, I think. But the landscape that is in front of these units really goes against the grain of that. If we can get, I think it's sheet number SP47. There's a detail that shows typical landscaping. There, perfect. Excellent, right there. Thank you. So when I looked at this, I noticed that if you look at the walks and the way the landscaping is done and where the lawn area is, and where the building demising lines are between the units, you'll see that the lawn area is along the demising line. In other words, what you would expect to be lawn in front of a unit is actually lawn in between units. And normally in a townhouse development, the yards are separated by landscaping or fences or devices that demarcate the yard for the unit. And there is an association between the front yard of the building and its landscaping and the building itself. And it presents a unified composition. In this case, you've got this, there's this alternating pattern, which has the lawn where you would expect there to be a division of hedges, and hedges and a walk where you'd expect to be a lawn. And it's like a counterpoint, which is really going to, I believe, really going to detract from what otherwise could be a very powerful composition, help people further identify their homes and have a rhythm and a pattern on the street in the neighborhood, which makes sense. To me, makes sense. And I think to most people would make sense because that's the way we build things. So the way this is done, it seems to me, it looks like it's clearly, the lawn areas are clearly part of an overall master plan, development plan that is about the green space of the project and really not about identifying the units themselves with landscape. And that may be a small point for some. If it's small enough point, I think it'd be great to fix it. But I think that it would be a more powerful and feel more like a normal neighborhood if that was just adjusted a half a step. And then you would have something which would feel more normal and less like a project. And we've been we've been trying for quite a while to make this look more like a neighborhood and not like a project. And Toll Brothers has been terrific in working with us to get this done. And this is sort of the last piece, which to me seems could be done a little bit better. The other thing I'm concerned about is the repetitive nature of the landscape and whether there could be more differentiation from unit to unit instead of what appears to be a uniform landscape treatment, which would go across all units and along all the streets.
Well, I can begin to speak to that, and maybe James can help me. I think there are two approaches, Tom. Certainly, you could try to landscape each unit individually as opposed to as a block. I think that the landscape architect here chose to, in the landscape, which is only at the ground plane as opposed to the house itself. I think the house is going to be, or the units are going to be architecturally stronger than the landscape. So the landscape treatment, to my eye, is not as, it's more noticeable here in plan view than it will be in actuality. So I think that you're right. It is done so that the three units are landscaped together rather than individual landscapes for each of the units. To your second point, these are typical unit plantings. I don't think the intent is that each block looks exactly the same, but this is the type and quantity of plants that would be provided for each unit, so that there may be some individual, just as there are in the architectural treatments, individual choices for plants for the homeowners. I think this was, it was not intended that this is a cookie cutter that's applied to every unit like this, but this is the quality and the quantity of plants that would be provided.
Thank you. That's helpful to me on Tom's point. Tom, one of the things that when I look at this, and I didn't notice it before, that it's the walkway into the house is like very narrow, as opposed to putting the lawn in the middle and having a funnel into the front door, which I think actually is more enticing. So that would be a comment that I would add to all this, that maybe the landscaping, as Tom suggested, should be moved over half a unit, which would then allow everybody to have their own clearly designated front yard. This would be the funnel. And that would help, I think, with, well, whose property, whose bush, whose piece of lawn is it that has to be maintained by who?
Well,
yeah, I mean, everything's going to be maintained in common, but yeah, Tom, I understand your point. I think this is this is also a tough example too, because it's, the building's a mirror image of itself, right? Divided down the line, where we have a number of different conditions on the site where you have side entry doors and front entry doors. So just structurally, you're going to start to get some significant variation in planting layouts. I do think that we probably could incorporate the use of turf a little bit more creatively in front of the building to kind of create some more clear lines, rather than everything kind of blending together from one unit to the next. And also to create some, breaks in planting beds, again, to also, create, because you don't, these are individual homes. You don't want each one to be its own, specific botanical, garden, but, we want uniformity in our plantings, but there should be some clearer separation between where one person's home ends and another person's home begins.
Well, thank you. James, thank you for that. I agree with 90 units. It'd be crazy for anybody to say, okay, we need a specific landscape plan for each unit. That's just unreasonable. And I think I understand properly that this is a statement of intent rather than a specific plan. I'm assuming that that's true with respect to the landscape materials in particular. But it's it's again the positioning of the scallops. It's the scallop lawn, right, along the sidewalk, which is a counterintuitive to where that normally would be. And to the extent that one relies on the architecture of the unit to identify their home, I happen to disagree with Andy. I think that the landscaping is, if not equally important, almost equally as important to identify, the home and and that I think it's a three-dimensional. These are three-dimensional objects. They've got color, they've got texture, they have, I mean, all the things we love about plants, and that's why we do them. So again, if it would mean, maybe they don't all have to be scallops. Maybe some can be rectangles, right? Just in order to just create a little bit more variety, make it feel more like a neighborhood that grew up over time, and help identify the unit with the landscape in front. I know it's not literally someone's front yard, but that's not anything that's anybody really needs to know about. It's really the image of it and the relationship of the landscape to the front of the building. So I offer those comments and wonder if there's a way to look at it again. I don't think it would take a big effort to make the adjustment unless there are some fundamental principles that you guys as developer, it doesn't work for you. So those are my thoughts.
Nope. We'll take a look at it.
Thank you. Otherwise, I think this is going to be terrific. I really do.
Us too. We wish we were in the ground now selling houses.
I bet you do. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Okay, anyone else, any comments, questions?
I have a thought, to what James just said, I think, and that I know you're going to start with homes being built along the main road going past the gym when this all gets approved. But I wonder if we could help with that in allowing maybe 2 or 3 models to be built earlier. I don't know how to do that. That maybe the applicant could, if we're in agreement with a thought like that, then
yeah, we've contemplated starting models earlier within our phasing. We've incorporated that into our initial phase in the phasing plan.
Fine.
Yeah, that's our big push out of the gate, is to make sure that we get our models started as quickly as we can, because they house our sales centers too.
But you could rent space in the other buildings for sales center, right?
I don't know. Those landlords are driving a tough bargain.
All right. I can understand that.
Nasty people, those landlords. From the nasty person, Bob, what are the next steps as you see them here, just so we could kind of eyeball some scheduling thoughts here? I know that's my continual song that I sing, but can anybody kind of talk a little bit about how we see the balance of this unwinding against some sort of a calendar, if you will?
Well, it's always important to do our holiday planning. So
yes, that's exactly. My wife wanted to know how many people were going to be here for Christmas, and that the social distancing thing may still be with us at that point.
Yeah, I hear maybe it's going to go to 26 feet. That's going to make it interesting.
Well, I think the next issue, and I think Sabrina raised this in her memo, the suggestion that the next step is to set a public hearing on this application. Our thought is, frankly, to set it with enough space so that your team can accomplish, even more toward the outstanding items that Sabrina and Bob and Dennis have outlined. I think the ones with Dennis are pretty easy, and then to go from there. Now, where you are in the master subdivision approval, I guess Andy's given us an update on that. that has to be, that's just one of those things that has to be done first before other administrative steps can follow. But what we can do is, in anticipation of continued progress in that area, is I would entertain a motion by the board to set a public hearing for perhaps 6 weeks down or so. I don't know what the Sabrina and Felicia, I don't know what the requirements are for the information that must be submitted for those dates looking down the road. So we need to coordinate with those.
The November 4th meeting, it's on the 4th due to Election Day. The deadline is October 13th.
Andy speaking, obviously, I'll say we can make that. Andy, can you make the submission requirements based on the give and take between you and Bob and Dennis and Sabrina by the 13th?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a yes from our end. Could we get a marker for November 4th? None of us have to go to the polls. We're all absentee voting, so we have nothing else to do that night.
Well, you may even have weeks later to do it if you're late.
I was going to vote in person, but I vote in person at town hall. So
Okay, all right. So we're going to save you. So that's going to be
Can I suggest that it's November 3rd, I believe you're talking about, which is the Tuesday?
That's
November 4th.
November 4th. November 3rd is election day. We don't have
Oh,
any.
so you do
November
it the night-
3rd,
I
and we
thought you were
moved our
saying-
meeting to a Wednesday.
I got you. I thought you were saying it was the night of election day, so you've pushed it to the 3rd. That's
No,
fine.
no, no, no,
Okay.
we moved it, yes.
Got it, understood.
Yeah. So if that makes sense for folks, we can pencil it in. Of course, if there's any problem or any kind of delay, we can, move it 2 weeks further. But why don't we shoot for that?
That'd be great. Thanks, Bob. We haven't had any delays, so I'm sure we'll hit that date right on.
How many
All right,
shopping
well,
days are left, Felix?
Well, there's plenty of shopping days. There's just not much shopping money left.
That's good.
Well, yeah, who leaves your house to do shopping anyway?
Right.
So does that make sense? So it makes sense, Felicia and Sabrina? So we'll earmark
Yes.
pencil in November 4 and hope to see the material and see if we can make some progress.
Thank you.
And in the meantime, I see, Bob has proposed a number of meetings and we should really, follow through on those at the staff level and see if we can make progress on some of those technical issues as well.
Will do.
All right,
And,
so
it's James. One final question. So we had discussed our last meeting starting the process with the Architectural Review Board. So we've continued to refine plans, and we're getting close to that point where we think we have locked in on some product that we want to share with the Architectural Review Board. Can we do that in parallel with the site plan process?
I think so. Can't they, Sabrina?
Well, there's really, I think, you're welcome to go to the ARB, but I don't know if that would be instead of when you submit a building permit. Because typically, when you submit a building permit, you have to go to the ARB over a certain level. So I would hate for you to have to go twice.
Would it be, if we were to present what we felt was like a comprehensive offering, would we be, has ERB kind of reviewed projects like this in totality? And so long as you built what they had previously looked at and approved, that there's not a reason to go back with every building permit submission?
I'm open to having those discussions with the building inspector who runs the ARB and see how he feels about that and give you some guidance.
All right, great.
All right. Well,
Great.
a lot of progress tonight. I know it's been a while, but thank you. Is that Bob? Thank
Yep.
you for knocking that list of 47 down to 14. Thank you, Sabrina, for getting. It feels like we're moving in the right direction. So thank you, everyone.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll see you next on the 4th.
Thank you.
very much.
Okay, very good.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we have our last items. We have some minutes. I had to pull them out of my box here. Okay, we have minutes from June 2nd. This was this the special meeting? No, regular meeting. Meeting of June 2nd. Let's see, we have everyone who can vote on it. Okay. Does anyone have any substantive issues? I mean, I have some wordsmith issues that I can just send to Felicia.
Yeah,
But
I only
any
have
substantive-
typos, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyone have any substantive issues? Anything that they felt that was wrong? There were, a couple places where I thought I came across a little strongly in these minutes as I spoke to Jennifer. I think a lot of these things were subject to votes, and I think we just have to dress those up a little bit. But other than that, I didn't have any issues with June 2nd. So if there are no changes, no substantive changes other than grammatical or minor changes that we can just submit to Felicia for amendment, is there a motion then to adopt the minutes of June 2nd?
I had one
As amended.
Oh, okay.
I have one, and I don't know if anybody caught it, but on page 3, line 52, it's actually line 51 and 52. It says further the town can enforce further the town can enforce the prohibition against no further subdivision. But the prohibition and the no are wrong. So it should just be the prohibition against further subdivision.
Period.
Anybody else caught that? I realized I put it in just to see who would catch it.
Okay.
Thank you, Sabrina. Nobody else got it.
Is someone, Sabrina, you had an issue? Or was that the issue?
No, I commented that, thank you, Sabrina. Nobody else got the joke.
I was always.
I got it, Clinton. I was on mute at first.
I just wanted to make
It's
clear.
getting late. Let's move on.
Yes.
I wanted to make clear who was sending me revisions. I know Bob is.
Dick Brownell.
Okay.
I'm going to send you some, Felicia, where you misunderstood my corrections.
Okay.
Felicia,
You'll
I
be getting
thought,
3.
Yes.
Felicia,
Yes.
I thought your minutes were perfect. And I did read them. For
Please.
the skeptical board members, I did read them. They were thorough and perfect.
Thank you.
Bob, well, let's go through our little comments, because perfection seems to be the new standard. Maybe not. We'll let it go.
Yes, I think we should let them go. Okay, is there a motion?
So Felicia expects comments from 3.
Yes, I got that now.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the minutes as now changed and to be changed in the future?
In the near future. In the near
future, but without substantive changes.
Motion.
Okay, Eldad motion.
Second.
Second, Dick. Dick, do you vote the vote here?
Yes.
Dick. Dick again. Yes. Keep voting, Dick. This is today's voting. Tom.
I'll vote yes for Tom.
Eldad?
I'm going to go with yes.
Okay, that's four of us, 4 yeses then. Thank you.
Okay.
So we have next the minutes of June 11. This was a special meeting. I think this was the one to entertain that referral from the town board. Oh, by the way, on the minutes, we have to obviously take off Greg's name because he's not present for the vote. And the same on the next one.
Well, we don't take off that he was present, just on the vote at the end.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry, yes, exactly,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Because my comment was, on the next one, June 11th, obviously, this is why we're going to sorely miss Greg, because his comments were very important in this memo. Any issues, any substantive issues, changes? If not, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of June 11th?
Motion.
Second? Okay, I'll second. Eldad?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'm yes, so it's 4-0. And finally, the minutes for the meeting of June 17. Again, any substantive changes, amendments? I just had a couple of very little minor ones I'll just submit to Felicia. There were the issues, I did raise this with Jennifer, Felicia, and I think just for consistency, did she talk to you about the ayes and the noes in terms of the roll call votes? Because since we're being asked to do these roll call votes, I think we should have consistency in the minutes showing the actual ayes and nays on various votes. And I think this was also the meeting where we actually had a specific nay, and Tom's negative note needs to be set forth.
Yes, she did. She sent, I'll make sure I change that.
Okay, terrific, great. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is there a motion to?
Well,
Yeah,
I'm curious about page 8. Maybe I probably missed this somehow, but that there was a couple of things that Clinton was going to do, and I don't know whether they're pertinent to in some documents say that they were done. Well, it doesn't have to be this document, I guess. Maybe it should be, but I don't know. So that's on page 7 of 8. Where some research was going to be done, and I don't think we discussed the research for this. Well, I'm not sure whether we're clean on this. That's the problem. Is it open still? Because we didn't address the research that was done relative to Bukowski. Or did we?
This is on page 7, but what line are you talking about?
Pardon me? Page 8?
Oh, 8?
Page 7 of 8. And it starts with, Mr. Smith. There's a paragraph that starts with Mr. Smith on line 21.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of things that were going to be done. And I know some of this has been done because I heard some of it relative to the Sing site. But I just don't know whether we just move on or whether we need some closure on this.
Well, I think in line 21, Clinton said that we could write a letter to the town board. And I didn't think that we actually entertained a motion and directed that we would send a letter to the town.
No, it was the last line, 26.
Well, he would like to know the restrictions, and I guess all Clinton responded was he didn't know what they were. But again, I thought that those restrictions were, again, those private restrictions that were private easements enforceable only by, the neighbors.
Okay.
I think that's what it was.
Correct.
Okay.
That's exactly what it was.
All right. And so I know that research was done to a certain extent, at least relative to the Reader's Digest deeds versus what the town can do. So that takes care of line 30 in my mind. And, I don't know what we were going to do down on 42. How are we going to proceed with other properties in the sector, which gets to Tom's point. And, Ms. Hull stated that although not part of the resolution, a memo could be written. And then, it's probably a sidebar that, do we want to do some sort of memo of some sort with, because Tom and I have concerns that are somewhat different about that. So other than that, I had no problem.
So if I may, if you wish to have a discussion about a memo or something, then we need to put it on as a work session item on your agenda.
Okay.
So you can discuss it and it can be noticed properly, because, picking it up from the minutes and then carrying forth a discussion on that isn't fair to the public who may want to participate in that discussion
Okay. Well.
or watch that discussion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm not really strong on this. Other, if everybody thinks there's enough closure has been given to the public, on the whole thing, well, that's fine. But I think Tom has an issue with the other properties, and should we be making a plan for that? And I think that's what the discussion should be. And so a work session would be good. Tom, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do think that it's appropriate to at least talk about whether we're going to talk about it. I know that Sabrina has already, I think, in our previous meeting, raised some caution about the resources available to do what, may end up being a lengthy sort of an analysis, almost of a sort of a sub, new sort of subdivision sort of analysis that we would be sort of looking at, and the consequences of that. There are so many consequences to it that it can be a bit of a rabbit hole if we're not careful.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sabrina,
I also think, well, I do want to weigh in it. I think that, planning studies are important. I think that if, the direction of my work and my staff comes from the town board. I think that if you guys have specific concerns, particularly in this neighborhood, and you want certain investigations, the best approach would be to discuss a memo from your board to the town board requesting that my office undertake such a study. We have a lot of tools in my office, GIS, we have all sorts of things that, I've got wonderful professional staff who can put together something, but it has to be at the behest of the town board acting on behalf of you, directing us to do it. Like, I would love to say, I can put that together for you, but I can't, because I'm not in control of my own, of taking on new projects like that, given that we're trying to keep our heads above water with everything that's going on. But with that said, if, for example, the chairman wanted to, write a memo to the town board or sign a memo on behalf of this board to the town board saying you'd very much like a study regarding, this area of town and the back lots be conducted, the town board would then determine whether or not that's something that they want my office to do. If you copy me as the director of planning in that memo, I can raise that with my administrator and kind of come at it from both directions.
Right, thank you for that. So it seems to me that again, this is something that could be a bit of a, going down a rabbit hole. So if we were to sort of post this up for the town board, for Sabrina to look at and say, yeah, this is reasonable to take to the town board, it seems to me that we ought to be very specific about this thing and put, boundaries on it, so that, we ought to be, do some real clear thinking about what exactly it is we're concerned about, and what we would be requesting the staff to look at. And that would require a discussion that we should have in order to come up with a piece of paper, and you don't go beyond the the four corners of that piece of paper. If we think it's something that's worthwhile doing, I would recommend that we do it with that in mind.
I
think
agree.
that's a good suggestion. And then the other issue is we also, in view of the latest two applications, I think we also need to recognize and look at, what really is at stake, what properties are left. I mean, it sounds awful when you said, well, two of them are already shot. So what's the point? I just don't know what's left. It seems to me that there's only one or two lots left, right? That have not been,
But I do need to, if I may, I mean, and again, it's really a fine line of what is within your jurisdiction and what is not within your jurisdiction. And you folks have done a wonderful job in trying to preserve the tenants that you are so good at preserving, in the sense of protecting, that boundary, the neighbor's boundary, trying to align the homes, so on and so forth. And again, the magnitude of what it is you're trying to accomplish through what type of analysis is the big question that is in my mind.
Mine too, actually. And
Well,
so Bob, to
yeah,
Bob's point, I'm sorry, Sabrina, to Bob's point, if in fact there are only two lots left, then, why bother? But I don't know whether that's true. I don't either. I'm just not sure. So maybe we could find out whether it's worthwhile or not.
Well, that would be a great starting point, because if it's 4 or 5, then that's different than if it's just 1 or 2.
Correct. Yep, I agree. So I just don't know
But
what that answer is.
But I want to caution you as well. I mean, I don't know what jurisdiction you're looking to create in regards to examination of whether it's 5 lots that are left along that street. Through the planning board approval process, you've asked for studies regarding, is it a wetland, is it not a wetland? You've kind of run the gamut of your oversight through the application process, and I am questioning, what more are you looking to do with the remaining lots? They are still single ownership lots. They're probably, there's no, it's not a project coming in to be subdivided. Really trying to understand the genesis of what it is you want to accomplish.
Well, right, and that's something that we would work out and decide whether it's actually worthwhile to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the threshold question is whether we approve these lot mergers or not. I mean, we have the authority to say no.
Correct. And
recognize that if you say no, no one's on but the board. Are they, Bob? Or I mean, the board or town people?
No. There's no applicants or applicants consultants on this call.
Right.
If you say no to a lot line change, you will probably be subject to a lawsuit. By the same token, if you address all 2 to 5 lots, whatever the number is, you may be subject to a lawsuit. But in that case, you're really limited to what you can do. You can.
Point of note, folks, I don't mean to interrupt you, Clinton, but we are still live and recording.
Oh, yeah, this is still public. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't closed the meeting.
Well, presumably the minutes can reflect what I'm saying accurately. But then with all, if you look at all of the lots at one fell swoop, you probably, you can condemn them, in which case the town will buy them if the town chooses to do that. Or you can impose some sort of restrictions on development. But there too, you will be sued for whatever the value of that development potential was. So, you're your remedies are very limited.
Well, I don't, Clinton, I don't know at what point we're going to cross over into we shouldn't be doing this on a public meeting, but I'll ask the question and then you decide whether you can answer it. But the presumption that we would be sued if we did such a thing rests on what, I mean, what legal, I mean, what's the substance of the suit? What are they, I mean, what are they suing us for? I guess they're suing, the suit would be, I suppose, that they aren't being allowed to realize the value of their property, but we have laws that do that all the time. I mean, all of our laws are essentially restrictive, and this is just in that vein, isn't it?
We should discuss this in executive session.
Very good.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Clinton.
Yep.
So I think we have a motion out, or do we have a motion yet for the June 17th minutes? As
Motion.
amended?
I have just some textual changes, nothing serious.
Okay, nothing substantive then.
No.
Great, okay. So, and there's a second?
Second.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry, who made the motion?
It was a long time ago. It was Eldad, I think.
Eldad, okay.
Yeah.
Even Eldad doesn't remember it so long ago.
I do not. I'm half asleep. Half is being generous.
Okay, roll call. So Eldad, before we lose you.
Yes.
Yeah. Wake up, Eldad.
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'm yes, so it's 4-0. And we can do this by acclamation. Is there a motion to close the meeting?
Yes. So moved.
Motion, is there,
Yeah.
yes, okay. Second?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye, okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes,
Thanks,
aye.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good evening. What's
Good
left.
evening.
Aye.
Yeah, good night.
Bye.